Story 1.
My wife begged me to pay for her cancer treatment after cheating on me. Here's how I chose to respond. I initially encountered Ramona during my college years. At that time, she had a robust build, large glasses, and struggled with skin issues. Her major was in art, and her fashion sense was unconventional, reflecting her unique style. Regrettably, her distinctive flair didn't resonate as attractive or appealing to most guys, myself included. Despite pursuing different majors, she in art and myself in production technology, we found ourselves enrolled in the same computer graphics design classes due to shared program requirements. She needed the class for her diploma, while I required it as a prerequisite for AutoCAD. Assigned to collaborate on a group project, we realized we hadn't interacted much before, despite sharing some classes. Right from the outset, it was evident we were almost polar opposites. While I frequented the track and hovered around the popular crowd, Ramona smoked and gravitated towards the fringe of the avant-garde, the beatniks, and the artistic circles. My dating circle mainly consisted of level 2 cheerleaders and jocks, whereas Ramona was often relegated to the role of the larger friend or the second-choice girlfriend among the more conventionally beautiful or promiscuous art students. While working on our project, we found ourselves spending a considerable amount of time together. Human nature compelled me to glance at her, prompting her, I assumed, to reciprocate. One evening, our conversation extended beyond project matters and delved into more personal topics. When my next girlfriend arrived to pick me up, I felt a twinge of sadness at leaving Ramona, and it seemed she felt similarly. The following day in computer class, Ramona exhibited a frosty demeanor towards me. "What did I do now?" I inquired. "You're an absolute idiot," she retorted, her voice verging on tears. Sensing the need for privacy, I took her hand and ushered her out of the lab to a nearby park bench. After fetching refreshments, we resumed our discussion in a more comfortable setting, free from any potential disruptions. "Why do you think I'm a prick?" I queried with a smile. "Because you are," she replied, wiping away tears. "Despite lacking an artistic soul, I had hoped you were different," she added. As our conversation progressed, I reflected on her words. "And then you, with that woman," she interjected. "Are you upset I went on a date?" I asked incredulously. "No way," she snapped. "It's just that you're all the same. You're not interested in a meaningful connection with a woman who genuinely cares for you and loves you. You just want superficial relations with some buxom girl without intelligence," she remarked sharply. "Well," I responded calmly, "well-endowed women have the intelligence to leverage their assets, whether in dating, relationships, or simply in matters of closeness." She regarded me skeptically and inquired, "What exactly are you implying?" Irritated, I retorted, "They communicate. They take actions to express their interest to the guy." She remained speechless, her fists clenched in frustration, visibly seething with anger. It seemed as if steam would soon billow from her ears. Prompting me to seek clarity and understand where we stood, with a decisive gesture, I reached over and removed her cumbersome glasses, recognizing they obstructed her beauty. Then I kissed her, not a mere peck, but a fervent, passionate embrace. Later I learned it was her first kiss with a non-relative. That initial kiss led to more carnal ones as she relaxed, parting her lips, and our tongues intertwined in a sensual dance. Embracing her tightly, we shared lingering kisses on a park bench. The ensuing weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We completed our project, earning an A, and embarked on a romantic relationship. Ramona opted for contact lenses, visited a dermatologist, and adopted a slightly more conventional wardrobe. I never requested she abandon her bohemian style, but as our outings became more frequent, she required additional attire. You know how women are. She invited me to accompany her on a shopping trip and sought my opinion. I noted that jeans were a popular choice, even among artists. However, she expressed feeling too large for pants. I reassured her, praising her curves and likening her to the voluptuous models depicted by the artist Rubens. Encouraged, she purchased jeans and looked fantastic in them. Yet, I suggested her tops and sweatshirts didn't quite complement her jeans or skirts. She accused me of only being interested in her chest. I jokingly admitted she was right, but emphasized they were mine, and she wore them for my benefit. Being carnal with Ramona felt akin to being with a fairy tale princess. Though not wild, it held a special quality. As her first partner, I endeavored to make it enjoyable and memorable for her. Over time, her interest in closeness grew, and she even began to request it. While we never delved into extreme kinks, I cherished every moment because of my deep love for her. Some weeks later, she gazed at her reflection and remarked, feeling like a larger version of the type of woman she despised. I reassured her, affirming she was my girlfriend, regardless of appearances. We found immense happiness together and eventually became engaged. Following graduation, I pursued a career at an automotive design firm, while Ramona found her calling doing layouts for an art magazine. My family adored Ramona and embraced her warmly. On the other hand, Ramona's family was limited to her mom and sister. To say the least, I didn't particularly care for them. Once, at our engagement celebration, I overheard her sister suggesting to someone that I was too conventional and might stifle Ramona's artistic vision. Despite Ramona appearing radiant and joyous, her mom whispered to her sister that she believed our marriage was due to a pregnancy and wouldn't last. However, over time, we proved them both wrong. We were deeply content and genuinely loved each other. At our 7th anniversary gathering, her mom began hinting about becoming a grandmother, since Ramona and I were her only hope for grandchildren. As her sister was unable, Ramona quickly assured her we were trying. Despite our efforts over several years, we faced disappointment. Ramona's mom, Maddie, took it upon herself to schedule U.S. appointments at a fertility clinic, seemingly presuming the issue was with me. I attended the appointment, underwent tests, and provided samples, only to discover everything was normal on my end. Maddie, upon hearing the news, humorously suggested we practice more until our work was finished so she could become a grandmother while still young. However, Ramona's results painted a different picture, altering our lives indefinitely. We learned she had various reproductive health issues, making conceiving naturally extremely unlikely, if not improbable. That evening, I held her tightly as she wept herself to sleep. I reassured her that adoption or exploring available treatments were viable options for us. Deep down, I harbored resentment toward her mother for escalating the situation to such an extent. Tearfully, she told me, "If you want a divorce, you can have it. I'll never leave you unless you push me away." Addressing Ramona, I relayed her mother's accusation that she might cheat on me to conceive. "I'll never betray you, Mona. You mean everything to me," I assured her. Meeting her gaze, she questioned, "Why stay with a woman who's unable to have children?" Ensuring she caught every nuance of my sincerity, I replied, "Because I love you more than anything in this world, and losing you would devastate me." She seemed to calm down a bit and eventually drifted off to sleep. But honestly, those days are now a blur, and I struggle to recall all the details. 2 days later, we received a call from the clinic summoning us for an appointment. During the consultation, the doctor revealed she had referred Ramona's tests to a specialist. Our shock intensified upon discovering Ramona was battling an aggressive form of cancer in its early stages. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This explained her constant fatigue at 25, the unexplained body soreness, and frequent mood swings and irritability. The revelation terrified me. Fortunately, we caught it early enough to have a favorable prognosis for her recovery. The doctor directed us to a specialized oncology center and arranged an appointment for the following day. Ramona underwent an extensive battery of tests, marking the beginning of her challenging journey. I took a leave of absence and remained by Ramona's side throughout her ordeal. I stayed beside her during every test, offering support and encouragement as we awaited results. In the following weeks, Ramona underwent lymph node surgery and commenced radiation therapy. I occupied the family suite at the cancer center to be close to her. I greeted her each morning, stayed by her side all day, and even obtained permission to stay overnight until she drifted off to sleep. Occasionally, her mother and sister visited, displaying a chilly demeanor toward me, perhaps harboring the misguided notion that I was somehow responsible for Ramona's illness. However, the radiation therapy proved ineffective and began injuring healthy tissue alongside the tumors. Consequently, we opted for chemotherapy. Ramona experienced significant weight loss due to radiation, and chemotherapy threatened to cause hair loss. The hospital nurses were incredibly supportive, often going beyond their duties to assist me in caring for Ramona. One nurse, Kelly, was particularly invaluable. With her striking red hair, green eyes, and tall, slender frame, she exuded warmth and kindness. Each morning, Kelly greeted me with a smile or a joke, offering a comforting embrace or a listening ear whenever I needed it most, helping me maintain a positive outlook. The majority of nurses in the oncology unit had shifts lasting 4 10-hour days, with 3 days off. However, Kelly worked from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. She was present when I left Ramona at night and also when I returned at 6 a.m. the next day. In my experience, she was consistently cheerful, particularly in my presence. The only instance I recall her becoming upset was during a conversation with Ramona's mother, Maddie. Maddie remarked that I might likely leave her daughter now that she was sick. Kelly reacted fiercely, threatening to physically intervene. "This environment is utterly disheartening," Kelly expressed. "A large number of our patients receive minimal visitors, as their loved ones are hesitant to visit due to concerns of contagion," she elaborated. She emphasized my constant presence and support for Ramona during difficult times. "Holding the vomit bucket and assisting her to the restroom, were you here?" she asked pointedly, acknowledging my dedication. "He assists her when she needs to use the restroom," Kelly commented. Were you around when she experienced hair loss? He shaved his head to match hers, she chuckled, recalling his shiny scalp. Were you present during that time? She inquired with irritation. He administers sponge baths to help her maintain dignity, she noted. Were you present then? She questioned again. He has devoted all his vacation and sick leave to her. Her health insurance doesn't cover the treatment, so he's deeply in debt for your daughter, she asserted. And throughout it all, he has been by her side every single day, holding her hand and reassuring her of his love, she snapped, pointing a finger at Maddie's face. I wish I had witnessed it myself, but hearing about it later brought a slight smile to my face. But what truly mattered to me was Ramona's well-being. Several nurses shared the incident with me, all equally enraged at Maddie. I noticed Maddie became noticeably less aloof toward me afterward. In fact, she even reached out and patted me on the shoulder as I held Ramona's hand during her afternoon nap. The chemotherapy took a toll on Ramona, leaving her weakened but cancer-free. Her hair began to grow back, and we adopted a new diet to help her regain strength. She underwent multiple plastic surgeries to remove excess skin from her weight loss. Ramona emerged as a new woman, 80 lbs lighter, with clear skin, contact lenses replacing her glasses, and her hair restored. People who knew her couldn't help but take a second glance. Though not as striking as Kelly, she was the best version of herself, and my love for her remained unwavering. I returned to work, putting in extra hours to cover the medical expenses we incurred. Ramona couldn't work for a while. Our bed life, always fulfilling, intensified as Ramona expressed gratitude for my support during her illness. She began casually dating women from her previous job while I was at work. It seemed like a way for her to socialize more, as she was never very outgoing apart from me. Perhaps it was a form of post-cancer affirmation, though I didn't take it too seriously. Unbeknownst to me, my marriage was in jeopardy. Over the following weeks, Rem started returning home later and often appeared intoxicated. I've never had so much fun, she remarked. I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt, working 12 to 16-hour days to cover her medical expenses while she enjoyed herself without me. Her attire became increasingly revealing, prompting my inquiry. She explained she wanted to flaunt her newfound body, claiming it was just for fun. I couldn't help but wonder when it became necessary for her to seek validation from others. During that time, I pondered our marriage, sensing something was amiss. Despite my apprehensions, I hesitated to confront the truth. Ramona had become my entire world. Our shared experiences, particularly battling cancer, had deepened our bond significantly. Unbeknownst to me, my dedication had caught the attention of my company's owners, resulting in a substantial raise, promotion, and bonus. I saw this as an opportunity to plan a vacation with Ramona, hoping it would rekindle our relationship. Rather than immediately sharing the good news with Ramona, I decided to surprise her with a small family celebration for her upcoming birthday, hoping to discuss the idea of relocating together to rejuvenate our marriage. However, events unfolded differently, shattering my heart and our marriage. During a routine checkup at the hospital, Ramona encountered Kelly, whom she never liked due to her beauty and perceived threat, that overweight woman. Even with Ramona's weight loss, she felt inferior to Kelly standing beside her. "Hey Ramona," Kelly greeted. "It's strange seeing you without your lovely husband," she remarked. "What do you mean? I'm not without him," Ramona clarified. "Hugh's just at work, and why are you asking about him anyway?" "I didn't mean anything by it. You're simply fortunate to have someone who loves you so deeply," Kelly assured her. "Most guys out there are only interested in their own pleasure and eventually drift away." "If only someone looked at me the way your husband looks at you," Kelly began before being cut off. "It doesn't matter," Ramona interjected. Aware that I would be occupied with work all day again, Ramona sought solace in returning to the bar she had visited the previous night. She could probably enjoy a drink and be back home before I arrived. Upon entering the bar, Ramona was greeted by someone's embrace. "Oh my God, Ramona, it's been ages," exclaimed Kathleen Kinnison, one of Ramona's former college acquaintances. "What's been going on with you lately? You've lost quite a bit of weight. I almost didn't recognize you," remarked Kathleen. "How's your husband doing?" she inquired. "He can't," Ramona responded. "Just hanging out and having a good time." They approached a table and were soon joined by a group of men. Ramona got up to dance with one of them, becoming so engrossed that she failed to notice the door opening. Everyone in the bar noticed when Kelly walked in. Ramona was too absorbed in dancing to notice her, but Kelly observed her actions and companions. Kelly ordered a sandwich from the grill, returning to work with a newfound idea. In the following days, I maintained my usual workload while also planning Ramona's surprise party. I invited her mother, sister, and several friends, purchased gifts, and hoped the celebration and trip would rekindle our relationship. I was pleasantly surprised when my mother-in-law offered to assist me with decorating the apartment for the party. During Ramona's hospitalization, we grew closer, and while she may not have harbored romantic feelings for me, she respected my love for her daughter and accepted me. Over the subsequent days, I noticed a recurring pattern. Ramona consistently left and returned home late, and our once vibrant bed life dwindled. It was difficult to recall the last time we had been carnal. Women persistently bothered me as if they sensed my need for relief. One evening, upon returning from work, the phone rang. "Hey Brad, it's Kelly," she said. "Hi Kelly. Any news on Ramona's test results?" I inquired. "Not until tomorrow, but there's something important I need to discuss with you," she said urgently. "Could we meet somewhere? It won't take long." "How about the park across from the hospital?" I suggested. Kelly considered it and agreed. "I can be there in 20 minutes if that works for you." "See you there," I confirmed. Kelly believed the park was an ideal meeting spot. During Ramona's hospitalization, she and Brad frequented it to lift his spirits, sharing impromptu dinners while Ramona underwent procedures he couldn't attend. It held happy memories for them, and Kelly didn't want to taint that. Sitting on a small bench in the park beside Kelly, I greeted her with a smile. "Am I behind on payments?" "Is Ramona sick again?" I inquired. "Yes, she's unwell, but it's not cancer," Kelly revealed. In the ensuing minutes, Kelly recounted the places she had spotted my wife recently, detailing her actions and company. "I don't have evidence, but it seems she's being unfaithful," she disclosed. "Kelly, you're a great nurse, and I thought you were a good person too. Ramona would never do that." "She loves me," I asserted, though my conviction wavered. "I'm sorry to have to say this, but you need to be cautious," Kelly advised. "I can't believe she'd betray you like this," I retorted. "You're basing this on vague suspicions, no evidence. Perhaps it's best for you to focus on your own affairs." I rose to depart, but Kelly seized my hand. Gently, she lifted her hand and grazed my cheek. I found myself frozen in place, my anger dissipating. "I hope I'm mistaken for your sake," Kelly murmured softly. "It pains me to think you're enduring such agony for someone who isn't worth it." Her touch sent a shiver down my spine. "I'll be there for you when you need a friend," she assured, slipping a business card into my hand before leaving. I tucked the card into my pocket, watching as Kelly walked away. It had been a while since Ramona and I had been carnal, yet watching Kelly walk away, I felt a surge of desire. Everything unfolded better than expected. Kelly believed that if Brad discovered the truth too late, the pain would be worse. It was preferable to endure a few small blows rather than one devastating blow. Though she would never intentionally damage Brad, he needed to know about his unfaithful wife. Kelly couldn't pinpoint when her feelings for Brad had blossomed. It no longer mattered. Perhaps it was during those moments when she witnessed his unwavering dedication. Whether caring for Ramona or enduring her dismissive treatment after she started to recover, treating him more like a servant than a devoted husband who had sacrificed everything to be by her side for months. Kelly was aware of her beauty, a fact reiterated throughout her life. Despite her history with numerous men, none had bestowed upon her the same love and tenderness Brad showered upon Ramona. She couldn't fathom anything she wouldn't sacrifice to have such affection in her life. She felt prepared for the next phase of her plan. Returning home 2 nights later, I felt a surge of anticipation. The modest party was intended to ignite the romantic spark with Ramona anew. As I paid closer attention to our interactions in recent days, I noticed her growing distance and increased drink consumption. As I eventually drifted off to sleep, she had yet to return. Upon awakening, she was already asleep beside me, smiling as she rolled over. Despite knowing she was likely out drinking and partying, it was quintessentially Ramona. Initially averse to parties when we first met, she now sought to explore experiences she had once shunned, perhaps as a celebration of her triumph over cancer. While I simply wished for her to celebrate alongside me, I couldn't shake the feeling of my own selfishness. At 6:30, Ramona's mother, Maddie, arrived with her second daughter, Rana. They swiftly began decorating the house, aware that Ramona could arrive at any moment. Only 6 individuals were invited, as I aimed for a cozy gathering with close friends. By 9 p.m., guests were already wondering about Ramona's absence, prompting some to leave their gifts and depart. By 11 p.m., only Maddie, Rana, and I remained. I made a 4th attempt to reach Ramona on her cell phone. She returned the call half an hour later. "Hey love, I'll be heading home soon." Ramona's voice sounded breathless and intoxicated. "Where are you?" I inquired. Mom suggested grabbing a drink and I opted to join her rather than returning home. "We lost track of time," she explained. "I ended up tagging along with her and my disagreeable sister because they still harbor some dislike toward you. And I didn't want their negativity to spoil whatever surprise you had planned," she added. In the background, A male voice urged her to return promptly for some fun. "We'll reunite soon and you can unveil your surprise," she reassured. "Is it a big surprise?" she queried. "Somewhat," I responded softly. For a while, silence lingered. Then Maddie turned her gaze toward me, noticing my struggle to hold back tears. I felt stunned, as if my world had crumbled, unsure of how to react. "That's not entirely accurate," Maddie began. "Initially, I may have had doubts about your suitability for Ramona, but my perspective has shifted," she continued. "What a nerve," Rana interjected. "Thank you both for coming," I said, composing myself. "I'll tidy up and stow away Ramona's gifts," I assured them. "She'll likely return soon. You're welcome to stay, though I'm not sure witnessing her homecoming will serve any purpose," I added. "Why not?" Rana inquired. "As her sister, I'd relish seeing her reaction when she's confronted with her lie. She endured a harrowing battle with cancer," I explained. "We don't fully understand its impact. All we can do is support her and hope for the best," I concluded softly. Maddie and Rana departed, shaking their heads. I gathered clothes and personal items from the closet, swiftly packing to minimize return trips. Leaving a note for Ramona on the kitchen table, I ensured I had everything I needed to stay away for a while. The following day, I began seeking a divorce lawyer during work breaks, perusing online ads without making any calls. My colleagues assumed I was battling a cold or flu, as I maintained a distant demeanor. Despite Ramona's attempts to contact me, I remained unresponsive, adhering to this routine for 3 consecutive days: work, return to the motel room, sleep, and repeat. On the 3rd day, Kelly perched on the hood of my car as I exited the building, her eyes brimming with tears, leaving me perplexed. "Why didn't you call me?" she demanded, her voice edged with frustration. I remained silent, meeting her gaze, and the emotional barrier I'd constructed shattered, tears streaming down my face. "Everything you warned me about turned out to be true," I confessed softly. Kelly leaped off the car, enveloping me in a hug. Despite my turmoil, I couldn't ignore the inappropriate surge of arousal as her chest pressed against mine. "I never intended to cause you pain. If you can, please forgive me," she pleaded. Meanwhile, Ramona surveyed her cluttered apartment, her head throbbing with pain. "What day is it?" she groaned. "Brad needs to tidy up this mess when he gets back. Why isn't he home yet? Who's knocking?" Rising from her seat, she limped, undressed, to the door, peering through the peephole. "Phew, it's just Mom," she muttered, hastily donning a robe and opening the door. "Sorry for the chaos, Mom," she apologized. "Brad seems to vanish into thin air at work," she added. "Ramona, where were you? What were you up to?" Maddie inquired, her tone accusatory. "Or judging by your appearance, who were you engaging in illicit activities with?" she continued. "Mom, what on earth are you talking about?" Ramona snapped. "Ramona, why do you have hickeys on your neck?" Maddie pressed. "Oh, darn it. Brad better not see this," Ramona muttered. "Mom, could you fetch me some coffee? My head is pounding," she requested. Reluctantly, Maddie retreated to the kitchen to prepare coffee. "So, how did you cover up your deception that night?" Maddie inquired. "What deception, Mom?" questioned Ramona. "The falsehoods you told your husband on your birthday," Maddie clarified. "Ramona, when you claimed you were with me and your sister, we were right here beside him at that moment," Maddie reminded her. Ramona's eyes widened. "I need to think of something to say before he returns," she realized. "You have to help me devise a plan, Mom." "Why should I?" Maddie challenged. "Mom, I acknowledge that I made some mistakes," Ramona admitted, "but it was all just for fun. I wanted to experience things I never could when I was younger," she explained. "Back then, I was overweight, Mom, always the chubby friend, never the desired one," she recounted. "Then I met Brad and everything changed," she continued. "I grew more confident. I started dressing better because to him, I was the attractive one. But to him, I was simply an attractive woman solely because he loves me. But now that I've shed the weight, I'm attracting the attention of more guys, which is invigorating," she confessed. "Now I can flirt with them a bit and discard them whenever I please. Now I have options, and it's exhilarating," she admitted. "It's not serious. I would never actually leave Brad because I love him. I'm just having a bit of fun," she assured. "But you yourself said, Mom, that he's average and dull. And Brad will never find out anyway," she reasoned. "Hyun's always working anyway," she added. "He should join the game, otherwise he risks losing me. Just like now, he ought to be home by now," she concluded. "That's probably accurate," Maddie murmured softly. She approached Ramona and handed her the note discovered in the kitchen. "Dear Ramona, I'm genuinely happy to see you enjoying yourself after what you've endured. You deserve it. Beating cancer is a feat few achieve, but you entered the battle and emerged victorious. You didn't just overcome it, you annihilated it. In fact, you've emerged as an even stronger, more radiant individual than before. Right from the start, I recognized your uniqueness and fell deeply in love with you. Now you possess the confidence to step out and reveal to the world just how extraordinary you are and how immense your heart is. You deserve that too. Now I comprehend that there's simply no place for me in your life or your heart. After all, you won my heart long ago, and you deserve to continue moving forward. I hope you receive this note tonight and reach out so we can discuss our next steps, if there are any. If I don't hear from you tonight, I'll assume the worst and proceed with filing for divorce to grant you freedom from me. You can keep the apartment because I still won't be able to return there. There are too many memories. I simply hope your next partner is more deserving of you than I am. I gave it my all, did everything I could for you. Obviously, I fell short somewhere, and you deserve better. I'll always cherish you. Brad. After reading the letter, Ramona collapsed on the floor, sobbing. Maddie glanced at her daughter and reflected, "What a foolish daughter I've raised." Across town, Kelly escorted Brad to her home. She circled the car, opening the door and gently tugging his limp arms to help him out. Guiding him to her door, she ushered him inside and settled him onto the sofa. She initiated a conversation with him, recognizing that he had been operating on autopilot for days, merely going through the motions, but now he had hit rock bottom. Despite his outward appearance, she believed he possessed much greater strength than he realized. I'm going to assist him in breaking free from this deceitful woman, Kelly understood. Now wasn't the time to disclose any remaining details about Ramona to him. A detective agency had been monitoring Brad and Ramona for the past week. She knew the precise date and time he had left her, but decided to allow him a few days before confronting him. Ramona had engaged in far more than Brad was aware of, and Kelly wasn't certain if his delicate mental state could withstand it. Leaving Brad seated on the couch, she changed into more comfortable attire and prepared dinner, consisting of steaks and salad. While she enjoyed her meal, Brad pushed his food around his plate contemplatively. Throughout the entire meal, neither of them uttered a single word. After dinner, Kelly deliberately turned off Brad's cell phone, ensuring there were no messages. Yet this indicated that Ramona was still too intoxicated to realize his absence, which was a positive sign. Kelly then called the hospital, informing them she would be absent for personal reasons, and encouraged Brad to do the same. Despite Brad's reluctance due to financial obligations, Kelly insisted, and eventually he agreed to take 2 days off. Kelly provided him with a blanket and settled him on the couch, embracing him like a child and planting a kiss on his forehead. "If you need me, I'm here," she assured him, gesturing toward her bedroom upstairs. Meanwhile, that evening, Ramona attempted to reach Brad's cell phone 20 times, frustrated by his lack of response. She desperately needed to explain herself, emphasizing that she didn't desire a divorce and couldn't bear to live without him. Brad was her pillar of strength, her unwavering support. Despite her recent actions, she maintained that her marriage was paramount. Brad's love had been steadfast, even during her times of struggle, when she was overweight and overlooked by others. Recalling their joint battle against cancer, she realized their victory was a collective effort. She reminisced about countless memories with Brad, including the day he shaved his head in solidarity with her. Feeling foolish, she attempted to reach him again, this time calling his workplace. To her surprise, she learned that Brad had taken a couple of days off and had been assigned a new office since his recent promotion. Ramona felt a pang of guilt, realizing that Brad's return might not unfold as she had anticipated. Until then, she had assumed he was simply upset and sulking. She could resolve his anger by simply calling him and asking him to return home. Once he arrived, a brief conversation and closeness would mend everything. She envisioned spending the remainder of their lives together, making amends to him. Reflecting on the past few hours, she realized that her recent indulgence wasn't worth jeopardizing her relationship with Brad. She had initially been level-headed. How had she regressed into the type of foolish girl she had disdained in college? Initially seeking a bit of enjoyment and self-care, she now recognized her lack of control over the situation. Surrendering to the allure of unfamiliar men offered only an illusion of control at the expense of what she should have reserved for Brad. There was no love involved, only hollow, intoxicated encounters. Now she was left to ponder the extent of Brad's knowledge and what forgiveness he might require. Conversely, she doubted she could ever forgive herself for her actions. She had become the very thing she despised most. Kelly carefully and gradually assisted Brad. They retrieved his belongings from the hotel and purchased what he needed. At Kelly's urging, they relocated his possessions to a guest room in her home. She encouraged him to speak, initially coaxing out only a few words, but soon engaging in earnest conversation. However, the topic of Ramona remained untouched. As their 2-day respite concluded and both had to resume work, she returned his cell phone to him, observing silently. She watched as he sifted through his messages. Despite over 100 calls from Ramona, he deleted them all without listening. His jaw clenched, indicating a newfound resolve, and she believed he would eventually be all right. Upon returning to work, Brad felt somewhat improved, though his senses remained unsettled. Some coworkers had noticed Kelly picking him up recently, sparking a wave of gossip. "So Brad, who was behind the wheel of that red Mustang?" queried his friend Dave. "Brad's got a supermodel by his side," another colleague chimed in. Brad grinned but stayed silent. Undoubtedly, Kelly possessed striking beauty, perhaps even surpassing Ramona's. Did he genuinely believe that? Brad's cheerful demeanor was evident when someone insinuated he was having an affair with a mysterious redhead. Oblivious to Ramona's infidelity, all seemed well until it was time to depart for home. A security guard barged into Brad's office, urgently summoning him to the parking lot. Brad feared his car had been damaged. He was unprepared for the chaos that awaited. Shrill cries pierced the air before he reached the lot. "What the hell are you doing on my husband's car, you homewrecker?" Ramona's voice echoed. "You abandoned him with your disappearing act," Kelly retorted sharply. "What are you even talking about?" Ramona shot back. "You vanished into drinks and betrayed him," Kelly spat. Guards intervened to keep the women apart, but a crowd had already gathered. Brad approached Kelly, guiding her to the Mustang. He quietly instructed her to head home and assured her he would follow shortly. Then he directed the guards to detain Ramona for at least 10 minutes before driving off after Kelly. As he departed, Brad witnessed Ramona's anguished cries of surprise. Despite his deepening love for her, anger now welled within him. "Brad, we need to talk," her voice echoed. "We'll figure it out. You still care for me, I can see it," she insisted. Regrettably, she wasn't entirely wrong. With tears streaming down his face, Brad walked away. Later at Kelly's residence, Brad was prepared to confront the situation. "What's your plan, Brad?" Kelly inquired. "I suppose I need clarity about my marriage," Brad responded. "Are you certain you want to know?" Kelly questioned. "Absolutely," Brad affirmed. "I'm not so sure," Kelly admitted. Retrieving a large envelope from her office, she placed it on the table. "Everything you need is in here, but I urge you not to open it," she cautioned. "What's inside?" Brad inquired. "When I first came to you about her, you said I lacked proof," Kelly recounted, "and you were correct. Despite what I witnessed, I struggled to accept it, just like when it happened to me," Kelly confessed. "Anticipating your need for evidence, I arranged for a private investigator to tail her. Fortunately, my cousin owed me a favor, so it didn't cost me a dime. I've stitched it up several times. There's a stack of photos, audio clips, receipts, reports, and even footage. But, trust me, if there's any love left for her in your heart, you're better off not seeing this," Kelly advised. "By now you understand the evidence is concrete, confirming her breach of marital vows. Yet viewing it will only inflict more pain," she cautioned. "Once you witness it firsthand, it'll haunt you for a long, long while," she added. "You're starting to grasp this. I know it'll take time to move on from her, but you're beginning to see reason," she said optimistically. "This file can only drag you back. However, do what you deem necessary," she concluded. "What should we have for dinner?" Kelly inquired, heading toward the kitchen. Brad reached for the folder and extracted the initial photo, a clear depiction of Ramona lying on a table in what seemed to be a bar, her dress hitched up to her waist. Up to this point, there were at least 3 men. Brad found his split from Ramona excruciating, yet the photograph dealt a devastating blow. He struggled to focus or even breathe. Returning the photo to its folder and hurling it across the room, he collapsed onto Kelly's couch. He shut his eyes, feeling her embrace. For the remainder of the night, they sat in silence. The following morning, claiming illness, they visited a divorce attorney Kelly recommended. "I'll aim to expedite this with minimal pain," assured Sherry, Brad's new attorney. "You lack children and own scarce assets except for medical expenses. I'll cover those," Brad offered. "Why?" inquired Sherry. "Given your substantial debt due to her," she elaborated, "and her repayment acting in such a manner, well, you know," she added. "Regardless, this should be straightforward. If she contests, we'll threaten to expose the file," Sherry proposed. "The paperwork will be ready within days." Over the ensuing days, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Ramona received the divorce papers and promptly tore them apart. Not only did she refuse to sign or even read them, but she also declined to seek legal counsel. She informed Sherry that she would vehemently contest the divorce and vowed it would never happen. Instead, she proposed a legal separation, suggesting that after a year of mutual agreement, divorce proceedings could commence. In return, she requested marriage counseling and implored Brad to return home to salvage their relationship. Threatening to cite infidelity as grounds for divorce, which could tarnish Ramona's reputation if evidence surfaced, Sherry warned her. Ramona scoffed at the threat, demanding Sherry devise something substantial. "I've made it clear," she snapped. "I'll stop at nothing to prevent this. If you need to go to Rome and inform the Pope that I'm unfaithful, I'll purchase your plane ticket. But no one, especially you or that redhead, will take my husband without a fight," she declared. She also refused to entertain any alternative proposals until she could speak with Brad. "She's being unreasonable," Sherry later remarked to Brad. "In your shoes, I'd attend the meeting. Refusing to communicate with her could reflect poorly in court." 2 days later, Brad found himself face-to-face with Ramona in Sherry's office. "Why are you doing this to us?" she inquired. "You brought this upon us, Ramona," he replied calmly. "All right, I may have gotten carried away, drank excessively, and neglected you," she admitted. "I understand why you're upset," she acknowledged, "but that doesn't justify throwing away the 10 years we've spent together," she said earnestly. "I love you, Brad. You have to believe me," Ramona pleaded. "You forget that you lied to me, betrayed my trust, and shattered my heart," Brad countered. "You did things I never imagined you capable of." "You didn't consider my feelings at all, Ramona," he added. "It was all about you and your gratification." "But Brad, I battled cancer. You can't understand what that's like," she said sadly. "And after overcoming that, I just wanted to experience life for a while," she explained. "After conquering something like that, perspectives and priorities shift," she reasoned. "Ramona, I comprehend your perspective, but you're mistaken," Brad responded. "And now you'll have all the time in the world to explore life to your heart's content. I won't trouble you anymore. You can do whatever you want. You can entertain entire crowds of men every night and nobody will object," Brad declared as he rose and walked away, prompting Ramona to start yelling after him. "Brad, you can't just abandon me. What do you mean I'm mistaken?" Brad reclined in his chair and gestured for Ramona to join him. "Ramona, you didn't have cancer," Brad stated solemnly. "What?" she started, but Brad raised his hand to silence her. "We had cancer," he said, tears welling in his eyes. "I was there every damn day in the hospital," he snapped. "Only it was worse for me. You felt it, but they gave you medicine for the pain," he remarked. "I had to sit there and watch illness devastate the person I loved most, powerless to do anything. But I had to watch. There were times when I felt so guilty that I was ready to do anything, Brad recounted. "If I could take your place, I would," he confessed. "And I could, but I never left you," he assured her. "I had to. Pretend to be cheerful so that you could maintain hope and good spirits," he disclosed. "But inside, I was dying a little every day. Every night when they forced me to leave you, I went home and cried for hours," he revealed. "I was so afraid of losing you and not spending the rest of our lives together. And then every morning I had to put on a cheerful, confident expression again. When it was all over, having gone through it, as you put it, I was just as ready to explore life and have fun," he stated. "But the person I wanted to have fun with was busy drinking, and apparently other men besides the husband who went through it with her," he recounted, while she looked at her feet. "And one of us had to work hard to start paying all your medical expenses," he added. "So, you have a new body and a new way of looking at things, and I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. You have new priorities, and my wife is a cheater. You have a new point of view, but from the side you were looking at, you probably didn't see how you were hurting me," he pointed out. "You have to explore life, and I'm heartbroken," Brad said. "You claim to love me. How do you think I'll feel when I hear about all the guys you've had involving with?" he questioned. "I'm sure they're all great guys, Ramona. But where were they when you were in the hospital dying?" he asked again. "Cancer may not have eliminated your body, but the consequences certainly eliminated our marriage," he said seriously. "Maybe it wasn't cancer, but just you," he said quietly. "Sign the damn papers, Ramona. I have nothing more to say to you ever." Brad left the room. Ramona remained seated in a chair for an extended period, tears streaming down her face. Outside the lawyer's office, Kelly observed Brad's difficult meeting and realized he didn't need further exacerbation of his depression. Clearly distressed, Brad wasn't up for conversation or anything else. Approaching Kelly's 2003 Mustang SVT Cobra, she tossed him the keys. Brad cherished this car. Renowned as the Terminator in 2003, it held the title of the fastest production Mustang for quite some time. "Drive us home," she said, offering a smile. "Eventually, whether she signs the papers or not, your divorce will proceed." "Can we just take a little ride?" Brad inquired. "No," Kelly responded. "We have a lifetime ahead for adventures. Right now you're hurting, and I need to get some food into you," she insisted. Parking the car in Kelly's driveway, they exited and entered her home. Brad stole a final glance at the car. Driving it a bit longer would have been enjoyable. Kelly entered the house ahead of him, shedding her coat onto the living room floor. As Brad observed her slow stride across the room, he noticed she had already discarded her coat. Ascending the stairs to her bedroom, Kelly removed her blouse while maintaining eye contact, a smile playing on her lips. Step by step, she shed her shoes. Then halfway up, her tights, dangling them teasingly. Reaching the top, she dropped her skirt, leaving it behind. Brad marveled at the expanse of her fair skin on display, a realization dawning upon him that he was still alive after weeks of emotional turmoil. Hastily ascending the stairs, he collected his discarded clothes along the way, a reflexive action. Upon reaching the landing, he found Kelly waiting, engaged in an enigmatic feminine ritual. Kelly unfastened her bra, setting free her chest, which seemed to pulse with anticipation. Brad struggled to draw breath as he gazed at her, his thoughts becoming increasingly difficult to collect. "Come get me," she beckoned, darting down the corridor. Suddenly, Brad grasped the wisdom of the great American press secretary George Clinton in his iconic creation, Atomic Dog. Why should I be like this? Why should I chase a cat? It all became clear. Brad pursued Kelly to her bedroom, finding her poised on the bed. She knelt before him, methodically disrobing him. Each bared body part received her deliberate attention as their garments accumulated on the floor. As the clothing pile grew, anticipation mounted for the carnal connection awaiting them. "Kelly, Brad began, but she silenced him with a gesture. While Ramona embodied softness and submission in closeness, Kelly unleashed wild passion. She engaged fervently, conveying her complete devotion to Brad. She made it known that she was his anytime, anywhere, forever. They explored every conceivable pleasure, and ultimately, Kelly achieved her objective. She redirected Brad's focus from Ramona and the past to herself and their future. Kelly's former husband's infidelity taught her that some men would betray anyone, even a woman as beautiful as herself. Recalling his words when caught for the last time, "A woman, no matter how beautifully she is wrapped, becomes stale after a while, and you need to find a fresh one." Kelly promptly ended the relationship. She had longed for someone to cherish her as Brad did Ramona, believing he was the one. With Ramona's loss, Kelly seized her opportunity, vowing to treat Brad with the love and respect he deserved. Weeks later, Ramona remained defiant, refusing to sign the papers and plotting to catch Brad with Kelly to sabotage his divorce petition. She believed this retaliation would restore balance and reunite them, as they should have been. However, she hoped it wouldn't be prolonged, yearning for Brad's presence and feeling unwell herself. Nobody seemed to show concern for her anymore. When Brad returned home, he would lift her spirits, make love to her, and attend to household chores to restore her well-being. Above all, he would reignite her sense of importance. Though it might take time, they would overcome this setback. However, one day she inadvertently spotted Brad and Kelly at a restaurant. Observing them through the window, Kelly reached across the table, tenderly, caressing Brad's cheek. He reciprocated by holding her hand and planting a kiss on it. Brad didn't follow Ramona's anticipated course of action. He didn't engage in a physical relationship with Kelly as Ramona had with others. It became evident to Ramona that Brad was deeply enamored with Kelly. Realizing what she had forsaken, Ramona unraveled, bursting into the restaurant. She screamed at Kelly to stay away from her husband, hurling insults. "You're the one who let him slip away," Kelly retorted. "No, I didn't mean to," Ramona insisted. "I was just seeking amusement. I never intended for him to leave me." "You won't win over my husband," Ramona continued to scream. "He would already be mine if you would just sign those papers." "Not in a million years," Ramona screamed again. "I'll stop you first." As onlookers observed, Ramona's complexion drained and she grew faint, struggling to remain upright. Eventually, she sank to the floor, declaring she felt unwell. Regaining her composure, she exited the restaurant. 3 months later, Brad and Kelly tied the knot. True to her word, Ramona never signed the divorce papers. Her cancer resurged, and she was readmitted to the hospital. Despite receiving excellent care, the absence of someone by her side to support her in battling the illness made it unbearable. She lost her will to live, spending her hospital days inquiring about Brad or penning letters to him, pleading for forgiveness or simply asking for a visit. Brad offered to see her if she would agree to sign the papers. This time, the cancer battle was swift and merciless, with Ramona deteriorating rapidly over a month before passing away. Brad and Kelly attended her funeral. Brad delivered a poignant eulogy, expressing his deep affection for Ramona and reminiscing about their cherished moments together. He chose not to dwell on their separation, focusing instead on the positive aspects of their relationship. In a touching gesture, He revealed to the handful of relatives in attendance that he and Kelly had decided to name their expected child after Ramona. On some evenings, whether lounging by the fireplace or cruising in his 2012 Laguna 302 Mustang, Brad came to a realization: both he and Ramona had been mistaken. Ramona had claimed victory over cancer, leading Brad to believe they had conquered the disease together. However, the truth was that Ramona had only recently been diagnosed with cancer. Upon leaving the hospital, she underwent a drastic transformation. She became loud, angry, and destructive, wreaking havoc on everything and everyone around her, including her marriage, her relationship with Brad, and her family. Eventually, when she couldn't achieve her desires, she turned her destructive tendencies inward. As for Brad and Kelly, they lived happily ever after.
Story 2.
After 12 years, my wife requested an open marriage. I responded by asking for a divorce. We've been married for 12 years now, and things have always been great, without any particular up or down. My wife has always been a kind, sweet woman, and up until this, I thought the world of her. Then she went and broached the talk about open marriage. What if we consider opening up the marriage? She asked. Because all her friends did it, and it's 2024. I didn't get angry or anything like that. I just listened and offered my counters. I asked if her friends were influencing her into this. She said no. I asked if she already had someone in mind. She said no. I asked her to give me some time to think about it, and she agreed, stating, "We don't have to do it if you're not up for it." I shouldn't have, but in the days after, I checked her phone and laptop. Nothing suspicious or that suggested she was already cheating. Last week, I told her I'd thought about it, and in my opinion, she can get anyone she wants because I want a divorce. Cue the sobbing, the begging, and all. If I knew, I wouldn't have ever asked, she said. She refuses to move out, and so do I, so I sleep in the guest room. She's taken sick from work, and every time I'm home, she keeps begging to talk and for me to go back to the bedroom with her. I believe her friends actually tried to influence her, and she didn't do anything at all. But this unraveled my perception of her. Was I too fast to mention divorce? Asked for an opinion of the community. You're going to get it. First up, this may or may not be an overreaction, but my own marriage went into a separation, divorce still up the line, after a couple of months of open marriage, albeit on both sides. But looking back, I wish I had the guts of being the one proposing the divorce. Someone else chimes in, well, I understand that requests for open marriages are often the beginning of the end for many relationships. I also think that OP definitely jumped the gun here. His wife was trying to start a conversation, and his reaction was to end it in the most dramatic way possible. He should talk to her, not necessarily because he wants to save the marriage, but just out of respect for the years they spent together. The fact that he has no interest in understanding her perspective or motivation, or even letting her admit that she was influenced by her friends and now regrets it, makes it seem like he was looking for a way out already. And this was just a handy one. Someone else adds, I mean, you are who you are. If you can't forgive her for even considering the concept of having sex with someone else, if that absolutely destroyed your mental image of her, and you feel that you can never love her again, then you do what you have to do. It doesn't matter whether any of us agree or not. In the end, it's your life, and you're the one who has to live it. Now, sure, from my perspective, your reaction seems a little unfair. If she legit has friends who are doing this stuff, and she was curious whether you'd be into it, and she asked you, and was happy to accept no as an answer, what else was she supposed to do? Partners should be able to talk to each other. Partners should be able to disclose even their most messed up, would never act on this desires in a place of shared trust. I hate to see people knee-jerk reject each other over even discussing sex, because that encourages people to stay buttoned up, closeted, repressed, and terrified to even ask the question. And that leads to a lot of people getting hurt eventually. I have seen this happen sometimes, when women react with an over-the-top response when their husbands bring up even minor sexual curiosities. But again, I'm not you. Only you know what you can live with in the marriage. If you're questioning whether you've moved too fast, you can try going to marriage counseling and talking through your feelings. But if you know you can't accept this, then that's how it is. Update. I wasn't jumping the gun. She was cheating emotionally and planning to do so physically. I checked her phone and computer and found nothing, but she came forward with a second phone I had no idea she even had. She thought I already knew, that's why she came out with it. Just as I was starting to regret my decision, her friends sweet-talked her into it. Apparently, those open marriages are just their affairs. She thought it'd help her conscience if I went along with the open marriage. The things I saw were stomach-churning. She begs to be given a second chance, and a part of me is foolishly considering giving it to her. But it's not the right thing to do. I don't want to leave her, but I have to for my dignity, pride, and self-respect. That I love her has become irrelevant. We got a couple more reactions. First off, brother, I'm sorry. Your wife has some crappy friends too, but that is what it is. You may recall my reply to your original post. I'm glad you followed up. I agree with you. You have to bail. If you stay at this point, she will do whatever she wants. Hell, she already was. The next person says, man, I am sorry. This was me to a certain extent. My husband asked for an open marriage, caught him in an emotional affair. Jury's out if it was physical until I caught him. We are in the process of getting a divorce. Our hearing date is in May, so all will be behind me soon. Long story short, I know how you are feeling, and it sucks. It has gotten a lot easier and better for me as of late, if that makes you feel any better. Whoa, discovering a second phone is like finding a cockroach infestation in your marriage. You squish one, and then suddenly there's a whole colony you didn't even know about. Looks like your friends weren't just sipping tea, they were brewing a pot of drama. Most importantly, your decision to prioritize your dignity, pride, and self-respect is commendable. It's not easy to walk away from your relationship, especially after investing so much time and emotion into it. But ultimately, staying in a situation that undermines your sense of self-worth would only prolong the pain. And honestly, if she's doing this to you after 12 years, she's no longer that person you married. What do you think? Would you have asked for a divorce right away? Why are I not up next? OP shines a light on their journey, embracing the power of vulnerability and showing others that they're not alone. Feeling surprisingly better despite pretty fresh wounds. Most of the posts on this sub are understandably and rightfully tragic stories. Mine is one of them, though I've noticed a shift in my mood this last week or so. And I wanted to share in case anyone else is also in the thick of it and feeling lost. Post history explains some background, but basically, I thought I was in an incredibly secure, safe, loving marriage just 2 months ago. 5 years married, my husband turned on me out of nowhere and says he hasn't been happy for a while, despite never acting like it or confronting me. He spent the next 6 weeks effectively phasing me out and increasing activity with the affair partner, which I knew about all along, but he thought he was hiding it. It's been almost 3 weeks since he asked for the separation, which prompted me to confront him on cheating. It's been a little less than 3 weeks since he's last lived in the house with me normally, and it's been almost 2 weeks since I've last seen him. I'm in the house, and he's in a short-term corporate apartment type place. I could barely eat for the whole month of November, but a week ago my appetite genuinely returned. I don't wake up in the middle of the night and start panicking or wallowing about my situation anymore. The constant pit in my stomach seems much lighter in the last few days, and I haven't had a really good cry in a few days either. What changed? I've been leaning on my support system hard and putting myself out there. Last week, I spent each night talking to a different friend on the phone for like 2 hours each. I went to a fitness class, made plans with newish friends for the first time this weekend, and made a completely new memory. I went to a holiday party with a family member where I knew literally no one, and it ended up being really fun. Lots of nice people, and again, totally separate from my prior life. I'm a homebody and sometimes avoid socialization. I'm a texter, not a talker. But moving out of my comfort zone in this way has been super therapeutic. My husband's fancy work holiday party was this weekend, and I was worried I'd have super FOMO leading up to it and on the actual day. But by the time the day arrived, I was actually relieved I did not have to be trapped at a party with an emotional abuser putting on the nice guy front for his colleagues. I don't want to be at a party with someone who has told me he doesn't love me. I have plenty of people who love me. Ahead of time, I muted Instagram posts and stories from those I follow who would be at this party, out of sight, out of mind. I'm in individual counseling 2 times a week for now, and I listen to Leave a Cheater, Gain a Life. I think Chump Lady's book is a big reason why I've started to see things in a different light now. The feelings of sadness, attachment, and longing for my husband have turned to ones of pity and disgust. Cheaters are repulsive. Cheaters are narcissists. Cheaters are selfish. They are not spouse material. I just need to see it for what it is. Now, starting to tell my story to my friends and family has helped tremendously. At first, I was worried about judgment or damaging my husband's reputation in case of reconciliation. But my personal healing and well-being is far more important than my husband's reputation, which he has now damaged. Not me. Don't be afraid to talk about your story. People have been so supportive. I've avoided seeing him, and I respond to the logistical texts he sends from time to time. And I never initiate first contact. Minimal contact arrangement. I know I am far from recovered. This journey is not linear. More tears and meltdowns will come at some point, but a few weeks ago I literally couldn't see myself coming out of the extreme debilitating spiral I was in. To all the betrayed people out there struggling, we got this. Edit to add, he asked for a separation, but specifically said he was undecided about divorce, whatever that means. I don't feel pressured to make any moves right away, because I need to prioritize my health and well-being first. I have a lawyer in mind if I need one. Well, if there's one thing worse than a bad breakup, it's a bad breakup with a side of betrayal, and it seems right. It's like winning the lottery of emotional trauma. But hey, silver lining alert, looks like you're starting to see the light at the end of the "my husband's a cheating narcissist" tunnel. Who needs FOMO at fancy work holiday parties when you can have a FOMO-free, drama-free evening with people who actually give a darn about you? It's not your fault he decided to throw your marriage into the garbage disposal of infidelity. So here's to you, OP, for navigating the treacherous waters of separation with grace and resilience. Remember, the road to recovery may be bumpy, but as long as you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you'll come out on the other side stronger and wiser than ever before. You got this. Lastly, a wild night of bubbles and trouble, possible cheating girlfriend. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend's friend and her friend's boyfriend invited us to her family's cabin in the North Woods. We were having a great time drinking and playing games. At one point, we decided to get naked and get in the hot tub. It was fun, but after about 10 minutes, the heat with tequila started to get to me. I left to go to the bathroom. I got sick and went to lay down for a minute, but I must have passed out. I woke up a couple of hours later when my girlfriend came to bed. She was just wearing a towel and dropped that before climbing into bed. I cuddled up with her and started rubbing her, but she grabbed my hand and pulled it away, then went to the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on, and she came back about 15 minutes later and started kissing me, then said she just wanted to clean up first. She gave me a BJ but didn't want to have sex. Am I just being paranoid or did something happen while I was passed out? Update. I did confront her and took some advice from the comments. I told her I talked to the other guy, and he already told me everything, but I wanted to hear from her. So she told me everything. Basically, her friend and the boyfriend started fooling around in the hot tub, and eventually, my girlfriend ended up joining, and they had a threesome. Not too surprised considering how I left them. I never intended to be away that long, but it doesn't excuse anything. After she told me all the details, I told her we were done and left. She's been texting apologizing, but too little too late. I mean, getting naked in a hot tub is one thing, but finding out you missed out on a surprise threesome while you were busy napping? Ouch! I mean, she could have woken you up at least. But in all seriousness, kudos to you for taking the high road and handling the situation with some serious self-respect. It takes immense courage to confront a situation like this head-on, and to walk away from a relationship that has been shattered beyond repair. You deserve so much more than to be treated as an afterthought, especially by someone you cared about deeply. Your girlfriend's remorse may be genuine, but it doesn't erase the pain she's caused or the trust she's shattered. It doesn't magically turn back time and undo the hurt you've endured. And who's to say this has been the first time she's ever taken part in steamy hot tub romps? Thoughts? Thank you for joining us today.
Story 3.
I've always aimed to do what's right, following the simple idea: treat others the way you want to be treated. These are the principles I try to live by, and I've made an effort to stick to them. Yet even though I never meant to hurt anyone, spoke harshly, or avoided responsibility for my mistakes, leading a good life turns out to be surprisingly tough. In summary, I consistently choose the morally upright path when faced with challenges. I present facts in a friendly manner when addressing others' errors and acknowledge my own faults. Despite my dedication to these values, a major life event took me by surprise. I was just going about my life, unaware of any warning signs, when it happened. Update. Returning from a 2-day conference in Texas, I was met with a surprise from my wife. In the kitchen, Casey and our kids were laughing. When I inquired about the source of their amusement, the atmosphere shifted. Casey didn't ask. She told me to sit down. She suggested that I take a seat, and she waved some papers in my face. There were adoption papers among them, and she explained that she wanted Jeff to adopt the kids. Assertively, she stated that she wasn't asking for anything except the house. According to Casey, I should sign the papers because she believed I wanted the best for the children, and then we could move on. She said all this in a cool and composed manner. My wife of 12 years had just handed me divorce papers and adoption forms for our 3 kids. My son, Devin, gave me a little smirk. Devin was 10. Joy, my daughter, didn't even bother looking at me. She was 9 and busy with her iPod, not bothered about losing her father. Patrick, my 7-year-old, was the only one speaking up. Patrick explained that Jeff had a big house and that they liked him, as if that would make everything okay. I just sat there, looking at Casey and the kids like they were crazy. I wondered if she was high or drunk, but there was no drink smell. So, why this sudden divorce? Casey dropped the papers on the counter and gave me a check for half our bank accounts, demanding the kids to take my bags to my truck. Unbelievable. They had packed my bags before I got home and waited for the right moment to spring it on me. I asked Casey with a slightly menacing tone if she thought I was going somewhere. She replied that I was moving out and asked if I hadn't been listening. I retorted, saying that this is my family's house. My parents said I could live here long before we got married. I didn't recall her name being on anything tied to this house. I didn't know why she wanted a divorce, but she wasn't taking my parents' house. I shouted that she could leave, but I was staying in this house. Casey rolled her eyes, and realizing she couldn't win, changed her orders and yelled at the kids to pack their bags. They had to change their plans and go to Jeff's house. I finally asked who in the heck Jeff was, and Casey responded that he's the man who's been with her while I'm at work. She wasn't guilty or remorseful. Casey showed nothing but disrespect and contempt for me. I looked at my kids for support, and my daughter told her brothers to hurry up, stating that Jeff can give them a better life. She added that Mom loves him, and so do we. My sons nodded in agreement. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. They all headed toward Casey's car. I told Casey not to touch that car, explaining that I pay for it, and it's in my name. I instructed my son Duck to call his sorry pals and tell them to pick all of them up. Casey and the kids looked back at me, and all of them, the kids as well as Casey, flipped me the bird. I was beyond angry. I had worked for this family, and they ditched me for some money. I did what any normal man would do. I got really drunk. For the first time in my life, I hated somebody. I hated this Jeff guy with a passion. But more than him, I hated my family. I realized that it wasn't all him. My so-called family had chosen to betray me. Once I had sobered up the next morning, I cleaned myself up and went online to find a lawyer. I made an appointment for the next day at noon. They love him so much. I decided to give them what they asked for. My attorney looked over the agreement and told me to sign it before Casey changed her mind. I signed it, and my lawyer sent it back. Casey didn't even ask for child support. In the blink of an eye, with the stroke of a pen, I no longer had a wife or kids. My family tossed me aside like old bread. So much for staying together until the kids leave or growing old together. Update: 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Like everything else, I changed over time. I threw myself into work, returned to college, and earned my master's and PhD. Now, I was Dr. Billy, PhD CPA. Many find accounting dull, but it somehow matched my life. I chose to start my own office, a boutique operation catering to high-net-worth clients with personalized attention. Through word of mouth, my client base grew, and by the end of my second year, I was saving a significant amount. I met Patty, a wonderful woman who shared my values and interests. A bit taller than Casey, with curves in the right places. By the end of the 4th year, my firm needed more space, so I bought a 5-story office building instead of renting. Patty and I loved it so much that we got married on the 4th floor, a small but festive event. Perhaps I enjoyed myself too much, because a few months later, Patty revealed she was pregnant. I wished for more alone time with my wife, as my life had been improving over the last 6 years. However, I was shocked when Casey served me with child support papers, asking for $3,000 a month and $432,000 in back child support. It seemed absurd, since I hadn't heard from them in 7 years. I laughed and handed the papers to my attorney. After a good laugh, my attorney called Casey's attorney, discovering Casey was broke and alone. She had learned about my success, remarriage, and growing family. Casey's husband, Jeff, disappeared, and a week later she was served with divorce papers. Jeff refused to pay child support, claiming coercion by Casey to sign adoption forms. The judge declared the adoptions void. With their divorce finalized and money gone, I became Casey's next option. Casey involved my parents, who had stayed in touch with her since she left me. They sided with her without telling me about their contact. Casey played the actress, and my parents believed her story. My dad was the first to talk to me, urging forgiveness and family reunification. I reminded him of my remarriage, and my father suggested fixing my marriage to Casey, leaving Patty and taking care of the kids. I lost respect for him, asked him to leave, and my mom made a similar request. They insisted that if I didn't take Casey back, I could move out, and they would give her the house. Despite an eviction notice, I didn't mind as the sale on my new house was closing the next day. Remarkably, when paying cash, people go the extra mile to get things done. Update. The next week, my parents came to the house and found it empty. Casey and her kids moved in the following day. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't talked to my parents, Casey, or her kids. Patty and I now have 4 kids, and our business is thriving. This year, I received the Businessman of the Year award for our area. A wonderful photo of me and my family appeared in the local paper. Proudly, I accepted the award and credited Patty for most of it. I told the audience that without my wife Patty, there would be no award for me. She is my rock. While delivering my speech, my parents walked in with Casey. Casey approached the stage and called me a neglectful father. She told everyone that I abandoned my kids and her, blaming Patty for ruining our marriage. I believe my attorney anticipated this. He seemed to have a sense that Casey would use this event to attack me and promote her false story. He used a remote to control a projector at the side of the hall. Private investigators are quite resourceful in uncovering hidden details and using advanced technology. It was astonishing. A film started playing on the blank wall, showing Casey and her attorney discussing revoking the adoption papers I had signed in the parking lot outside his office. She informed her lawyer that the court voiding them would be more beneficial than what she had given him that afternoon. They also discussed a plan to medicate Patty and film her cheating on me. Then Casey would come in and mend my broken heart. She also revealed how she manipulated my parents to be her puppets, threatening that they wouldn't see their grandkids if they didn't comply. When the short video ended, Casey's attorney, Finchett, tried to leave quietly through a side door but was stopped by the chief of police. Some judges in the audience took an interest in the tape. I glanced at my parents, then walked over to my wife and kids, helped them with their coats, and left. Outside, I kissed Patty, and we headed for the car. Just as I finished putting the kids in the car, my parents called my name. I got in my car without looking back and drove away. I didn't see them again until I was called to court to testify against Casey and her lawyer. After giving my testimony, I left the courtroom. My father was waiting outside. My father expressed how sorry he and my mother were and asked me to give them a chance to make things up. He mentioned the 3 kids who missed me and the 4 grandkids they had never met. My father urged me to find it in my heart to forgive them and put the family back together. I just looked and turned away. After a moment, I stopped and told him I would think about it. Update: Casey received a 3-month jail sentence and 4 years of probation. Her lawyer was disbarred for conspiring to commit fraud against the court and me. The Child Welfare Department warned that the kids would go to foster care unless my parents or I took them. I asked my parents to take them. My dad said I'd have to forgive them someday. My dad questioned if wanting to be part of the grandkids' lives was so terrible, emphasizing that they were old and would miss most of their lives. He asked if I was heartless, unable to see that she made a mistake. I explained that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in their lives, but Casey wasn't just mistaken. She was cold-hearted and got what she deserved. The kids chose him. I reminded him of his past words, saying that some things can't be forgiven, and he also mentioned the road to hell being paved with good intentions. I pointed out that he turned his back on me when Casey lied, cheated, turned the kids against me, and he still sided with her. Now, he wanted me to act like nothing had changed. I told him that he's old enough to know he made the wrong choice, and now he has to live with the consequences. That was a decade ago. Casey didn't learn her lesson. She married again, attempted the same deceit as she did with me, but it didn't end well. Her husband caught her with her lover and kicked them both. My kids with Casey are grown, and Devin and Patrick are in prison. Joy, before anything went wrong, came to our house, seeking to be part of our family. Patty believed Joy had been misled by her mother and insisted we take her in to help her live a moral and productive life. My parents met my kids before they passed away, leaving everything to my judgment. They asked me to distribute their assets fairly among their 7 grandchildren in my will. Patty and I will soon be empty nesters, and I'll cherish having my wife back all to myself. For some, Billy is seen as weak for not fighting to keep his family or for walking away. Some things just aren't worth the fight. My name is Rick, and during high school and college, people often thought of me as a computer geek. While I'm not the best-looking guy, I stand at 6 feet tall, weigh around 170 pounds, and have light brown hair. I've always been into computers, programs, and games, and anyone with computer troubles usually came to me for help. That's how I met Karen, who eventually became my wife. 7 years ago, we were both students at the University of Wisconsin. Karen studied ABA legal studies while I focused on computer science. She aspired to be a corporate lawyer, and I aimed to delve deeper into computers and programs. When Karen struggled with her computer system, a professor from the computer science department referred her to me. I helped her grasp the system, and we not only became efficient collaborators, but also good friends, spending a lot of time together. Now, let me introduce Karen. She's an attractive 5 feet 4 inches tall, blonde with a stunning 36-24-36 figure. She's not just good looking, she also has a fantastic personality and easily connects with everyone. I genuinely liked her, and over time, I fell deeply in love with her. Karen, in turn, got to know me and fell in love with me too. It might sound surprising, but stranger things have happened, although I can't think of any right now. Update. After 2 years in school, Karen realized she wouldn't achieve her goal of becoming an attorney. However, she remained interested in legal work and applied for jobs as a legal secretary. She landed a position with a major brokerage firm and quickly adapted to the job. We got married within 2 months, and she continued working to support us while I finished school. Over the last 5 years, her hard work, dedication, and friendliness helped her climb the corporate ladder, and she was eventually transferred to the Chicago headquarters to be the assistant to the manager of the firm's legal department. I earned a degree in computer science and decided to make a good living by writing computer game programs. Starting my own business, I've created numerous popular games that you or your kids would recognize. I've made a substantial amount of money and no longer need to work as hard. We moved to Highland Park, a suburb of Chicago, along Lake Michigan. Since we were both successful in our work, Karen and I have built a comfortable life together, working because we enjoy it, not out of necessity. To avoid getting bored, I secretly started another company in Milwaukee, about an hour's commute, investigating computer software fraud, CSFI Inc. Through confidential contacts at the Institute of Computer Technology, I began with a small client list that has continued to grow through word-of-mouth advertising. CSFI Inc. now has about 150 clients and might be working on 5 or 6 projects at any given time, generating profits exceeding $3 million last year. I hired a competent office manager, Carrie, and contracted computer experts like myself for investigation work. We rotate them on projects so they don't become too familiar to the customer. The only actual employees of the company are Carrie and me and the investigators. Each gets paid a percentage of the fee for the projects they do for me. Due to the huge profits in the software industry, the need for confidentiality and secrecy is extreme, so I've always maintained anonymity. In fact, no one at the company knows me, not even Carrie, because I always wear a disguise to hide my true identity when I investigate. I even wore a disguise when I hired Carrie to keep my involvement a secret. Over the years, I've become adept at developing new disguises to fool everyone. When I investigate a case, I get paid like the rest of the investigation staff, except my pay goes to a separate account I've set up under an alias. The majority of the investigations are done by my contracted staff, but about once a quarter, I take on a job myself for fun. Karen is unaware of CSFI Inc., so I use the pretext of going to Milwaukee to meet with my game distributor to get away for a few days to do the investigation. Actually, all of my computer game business is done through the internet for CSFI Inc., though. I drive to the company's apartment in Milwaukee, park my car in the garage, put on my disguises, and then drive a company car, currently a Buick, to the office to pick up the investigation materials. I go wherever I need to do the job, sometimes local, but sometimes in NY or C. I finish the job, go back to Milwaukee, reverse the process, and go home. You might be thinking that while I'm traveling, I'm cheating, taking every opportunity to date women and cheat on my wife. But nothing could be further from the truth. I love my wife beyond my own understanding and would never do anything to hurt her or my marriage. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Karen, and that's why I'm writing this story. I personally took on an investigation for Marcos' software to determine if one of their programmers was selling source code to a competitor. Jeff Marcos designed a program to track securities transactions, and I thought it would give me insight into Karen's work, so I jumped on that investigation myself. The company is in Oak Brook, another suburb of Chicago. I thought it might be fun to explore restaurants and clubs in my hometown while in disguise. Who knew? Maybe I would encounter some friends I could toy with. Little did I know what I would be really encountering and what I would be investigating. I had all the information needed from Carrie, my office manager, and I set myself up in the Drake Hotel in Oak Brook, a short drive from Marcos Software. I arrived at Marcos, and after a short wait, was greeted by Jeff Marcos. He was tall, dark, and handsome, a replica of the traditional pattern for a man that women would find attractive. Jeff was also very outgoing and friendly, and had a presence about him that put me at ease, and I really found myself liking the man. He invited me into his office and talked to me about what he suspected and how he thought I might approach the investigation. He set me up with everything I needed right there in his office and told all his people that I was a special projects manager with one of their customers there to work out the bugs on the program application with my company. I thought it would work out quite well, so we went with that approach. Update. On the second day of my stay, I confirmed Jeff's suspicions. One of his team members, a programmer named Tom, was indeed selling source code, and I found out exactly how he was doing it. While I was working on my report, Jeff's cell phone rang, which was placed on his desk next to me. Jeff wasn't in the room, so I glanced at the caller ID and was shocked to see Karen and my wife's cell phone number. Initially, I thought about grabbing the phone to surprise her, thinking her company might be using Jeff's software and imagining her shock upon discovering I was working there. However, I realized it would jeopardize keeping CSFI Inc. and my identity a secret. Instead, I chuckled to myself about the irony of the situation. Jeff returned and called my wife back. My amusement turned into heartbreak and sickness when I overheard him say, "Karen, I'm glad you called. I had a wonderful time last night. Can we meet at Morton's for dinner at 6:30 p.m.? Okay, I'll see you there. And afterward, we'll go to your place for dessert. Bye, beauty." I was stunned, feeling like I could be knocked out of my chair with a feather. I must have looked like a zombie, and the shock made me feel nauseous. My heart pounded so hard, I thought I might have a heart attack. I excused myself, went to the men's room, and sat in the stall until my heart settled, trying to comprehend how Karen could do this. I thought she loved me as much as I loved her. Yet, she was meeting Jeff again, and he spoke of enjoying the previous night. The things he said to her hinted at a level of relationships beyond what you'd say unless you'd had closeness. I couldn't fathom it. I had no inkling that Karen had been cheating on me. Our closeness life was satisfying, and she never complained about unmet needs. I was utterly bewildered and couldn't comprehend what was happening. And throughout all of this, my heart was breaking. How could she betray me, someone she supposedly loved? Did she love me at all? Was my marriage genuine, or was it just a facade? I genuinely felt like my world was collapsing at that moment. Everything I had worked for was for Karen and me, and now I was uncertain. Once I calmed down enough to think clearly, I decided I needed to confirm my suspicions instead of relying on the limited evidence I had. Once I gathered all the facts, or as many as possible, I planned to take action. I returned to the office with Jeff and focused on finishing the project, knowing I would dedicate the next few days to uncovering the truth. Sitting there was challenging because I wanted to confront him, but I understood that it would be a mistake. To make matters worse, Jeff had a big grin on his face and apologized for his comments in front of me. He explained, "I'm sorry for what I said, but that woman is attractive. I met her a few weeks ago at a customer's office and we hit it off. At the moment, I despised him, but I could see why Karen might be interested because he was easy to talk to." He continued, "She told me that the next time her husband, she calls him Computer Boy, leaves town for business, she'll call me and we'll meet up." Although it hurt, I held it together. She said she married Computer Boy because she knew he'd become rich, providing her with a comfortable life, while she could still have affairs with attractive men like me. He laughed again. I questioned her love for him, and she claimed she loved him, but also enjoyed extramarital affairs. I couldn't believe the information I gathered from him without revealing my identity or intentions. It became clear it was indeed my Karen, especially with the Computer Boy reference. It seemed evident she had cheated on me with him and possibly others throughout our marriage. While I knew a lot, I needed more proof before executing a plan. I informed Jeff that I needed to leave for the rest of the day and would return the following morning. In my car, I called Karen on my cell phone. She acted sweet and loving, expressing how much she missed me, making me nauseous. Aware of the deception, I asked about her plans for the day, and she mentioned working and possibly having dinner with friends. I informed her it would be another day or two before I returned home and said I would call her later. She insisted I not call because she didn't know when she would be home from her evening out with friends. In reality, she just didn't want any interruptions while being with Jeff. I felt sick to my stomach. Update. I felt the need to catch her cheating, and I knew exactly how to do it. On my way home, I went to the electronics store and purchased 5 new mini wireless surveillance cameras and a modem. This would allow me to monitor various areas in the house: the kitchen, living room, family room, master bedroom, and guest bedroom. I wasn't sure where she would take him, but I wanted to cover any possible location. When I got home, I used the remote to turn off the security camera, parked my car in the garage to avoid suspicion, entered the house, and rewound the tape to erase any evidence of my arrival. I installed the surveillance cameras, connected them to the modem and recorder in my basement workshop, allowing me to access the output online and monitor the entire house discreetly. Satisfied with my setup, I left the house, got into my car, and left the driveway. I drove around the block and reactivated the security cameras with the remote as I passed by. Unless she scrutinized the security tape closely and noticed the time break, she wouldn't realize anything had happened at home. Besides, Karen never bothered checking the tapes. That was my responsibility. After completing all these tasks, I started feeling hungry and went to a nearby pizza place to eat. I had a couple of beers, wanting to stay sharp as I kept an eye on what was happening at home. Later, I went to the hotel, set up my computer, and waited. Despite my hopes that it was all a mistake and she wasn't cheating, my emotions overwhelmed me, and I broke down in tears. Around 8 p.m., I saw her car pull into the garage, and it was clear she was alone. My heart skipped a beat, thinking maybe nothing was going to happen. However, a couple of minutes later, the security camera was turned off, and I couldn't see the driveway anymore. Switching to the kitchen camera, I witnessed her entering, dressed in one of my favorite outfits, a short black dress, rather low-cut with spaghetti straps. I loved seeing her in that outfit until that very moment. I knew she wouldn't wear it to go out with friends for dinner. She wore it to entice someone, usually me. But tonight, it wasn't me. Tears streamed down my face again as I realized this wasn't a mistake. Karen was not who or what I thought she was. I didn't have to wait long for Jeff to enter the kitchen. Apparently, Karen left the garage door open, and he parked his car in my spot to avoid the neighbors seeing it. When he walked in, Karen embraced him, and they shared a kiss. While he rubbed her back, she suggested moving to the bedroom. They grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and left the kitchen. I switched to the living room camera and saw them pass on their way to the bedrooms. Strangely, I hoped she would choose the guest room over our bed, though I knew it was a ridiculous thought. However, that wasn't the case. When I switched to the guest room camera, nothing was there. Switching to our bedroom, they were sitting on the bed kissing. Karen opened the wine and poured each a glass, toasting to a handsome man in great closeness. They drank half the glass and set them down. Jeff stood up, and Karen opened his pants. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I wasn't turned on, and I didn't want it to happen. If it seemed like the first time, I would have stopped it, but there were signs it wasn't. I needed proof before deciding what to do. Everything I feared happened. Karen praised their encounter and suggested doing it again tomorrow night. My heart broke when she expressed she might not let me have bad life with her again. Until that moment, I thought she loved me and just wanted more closeness. I hoped confronting her would make her stop out of love for me. But with that comment, I realized she didn't love or respect me. I knew our marriage was over because I couldn't live with someone who didn't love and respect me, no matter how much I loved her. My love died, and even though I never expected it, I had to mourn its loss. I turned everything off, got into bed, and cried until morning. I woke up, saw my swollen eyes and messy appearance in the mirror, and knew it was going to be a tough day. Despite the pain, I understood what I had to do. Update. I had been considering how to end our marriage and, frankly, how to hurt her like she hurt me. I know seeking revenge is immature, but I felt I needed to hurt her for my healing to start. I didn't harbor strong resentment towards Jeff, but it didn't seem right for him to be involved with another man's wife, break up their marriage, and not face consequences. I wanted my revenge, and maybe then I could move on. I went to Jeff's office to execute my plan. As computer boy, it was easy for me to make it happen without leaving any clues. I didn't even want to physically damage him anymore. I just wanted my revenge, and the cost would be high for both of them. During Jeff's staff meeting, I took his keys, had copies made, and accessed his house where he stored copies of his source code. Although I already had access to his computer system, I hacked into his security files, obtained passwords, and wrote a virus program to delete his source code from every drive on his network, including his home and customers' computers. Activating the program would change all passwords and destroy all copies of his program permanently. Then I hacked into my wife's work computer, used her password to transfer $200,000 from my business account to Jeff's, and then to an account I set up for him in the Grand Cayman Islands. I erased the money trail, anticipating that a skilled analyst could eventually trace it. I don't know if Jeff and Karen got back together on Wednesday night, but it didn't matter to me anymore. On Thursday morning, I triggered the virus program. By Friday at 9 a.m., I handed Jeff a report on the software code theft and informed him that CSFI would bill him for my services, knowing he wouldn't pay. I left his office with him expressing pleasure in knowing me, and I thought, if he only knew. But I smiled, shook his hand, and wished him luck. I went to his home, used the copied keys to find archived copies of his program, took them with me, and headed to Milwaukee. In my apartment, I burned them all, seeking revenge without personal profit. I stayed there on Thursday night, waiting for the fallout. Friday morning, I informed Carrie that I completed the project, and Marco's software could be built. She said she'd handle it, and my fee would be sent to my account. I drove home and found Karen crying. She told me she was sent home pending an investigation into securities fraud involving money from our business account. I acted shocked and asked for details. She mentioned money transferred to Jeff Marcos, someone she met a couple of weeks ago at the office, but didn't know well. At 9 a.m., chaos erupted when everything went dead as everyone was working. None of the programmers could access the system. Jeff struggled to get in, and the phones were ringing non-stop because their customers couldn't use the tracking program. I didn't witness it, but I knew it was happening as I described. Later, I found out Jeff had fired Tom for stealing source code, and when everything went haywire, he blamed Tom again. Well, Tom wasn't innocent, so he can face the consequences. As a programmer, I believe anyone messing with source code should be penalized. The $200,000 was traced to Jeff's account, and he denied knowledge, accusing Karen. She, in turn, denied knowing anything, blaming Jeff. During the investigation, I stayed calm until Jeff revealed they had a close relationship. I confronted Karen, and she admitted it, apologizing and crying for forgiveness. She claimed it was a one-time thing due to loneliness during my extended absence. I knew it was a lie, but didn't bother challenging it. It didn't matter anymore. Jeff was found guilty of securities fraud, fined $50,000, and sentenced to 6 months in jail, serving only 3 for good behavior. However, upon release, he lost his program and company. Last I heard, he worked as a programmer for a competitor, and ironically, Tom worked there too. Karen lost her job, and unable to move past her infidelity, I served her with divorce papers, citing the infidelity clause. Being a computer geek, her settlement was only 10% of our net worth. She was fined $50,000 for securities fraud and received 3 years probation. Luckily, she avoided prison, but with only $150,000 left, she couldn't afford a decent house in Chicago. She moved to Milwaukee and became a waitress in a bar. While she might do well, she won't enjoy the life we had together. I hope she always remembers how much I loved her and feels the hurt when thinking of me. Update. I sold the Highland Park house and moved to an apartment in Milwaukee. I still had $1.8 million from our shared funds and an additional $1.2 million in the CSFI Inc. account. So, I thought it was time to enjoy my wealth. I sold the company for another $4 million and decided it was time for Carrie to know her real boss. She mentioned she knew it was me all along, regardless of any disguise I used. Gotta appreciate that woman. And I do, often and well, and she loves me in return. Neither of us works full-time now. We're just savoring the rewards of our hard work. We got married soon after my divorce was finalized, and we're expecting our first child this December.
Story 4.
Reflecting on my life, I realize I've always been drawn to the stability of routine. While my path didn't unfold exactly as I'd imagined in my teens, it took on a shape of its own, one I grew accustomed to with a mix of familiarity and flexibility. Over the years, the responsibilities of daily life formed a rhythm that I welcomed, a steady blend of work, home, and family obligations. Together, my husband and I navigated the early years of parenthood, balancing family duties while nurturing our marriage. Yet recently, things felt quieter, as if we had slipped into well-worn patterns. Starting my role as an executive assistant felt like a fresh beginning, a way to bring added purpose to my life and contribute more to my family. The travel was thrilling, giving me access to new destinations, high-stakes meetings, and experiences I never thought I'd have. My boss, Dan, quickly became a significant part of this journey, sharing my enthusiasm for each success and milestone. Yet over time, that closeness shifted, and gradually the boundary between our professional and personal lives began to fade. As I began to wake, I felt his familiar presence close behind, and we shared an intimate moment together. Afterward, we lay entwined until the alarm signaled the start of a new day, drawing us back to reality. My lover got out of bed and went into his adjoining hotel room to prepare for the day. We always booked 2 connected rooms with an internal door to keep our relationship discreet. Discovery of our affair would have serious consequences. I was Dan's executive assistant, and we had worked together for just over 2 years, with most of that time spent as a couple. My role required close collaboration and frequent travel across the country for office visits, client meetings, and industry conferences, giving us plenty of time together without raising suspicion. Yes, I was married with a husband at home. Our marriage began rather unexpectedly. At 15, I was dating my first boyfriend, Alan, when one evening while my parents were out, things escalated, and soon after, I found out I was pregnant. By the time we told our parents, keeping the baby was our only option. My parents were furious and pushed for adoption, while Alan's parents encouraged us to raise the child, offering to help so we could finish school. Alan supported me through the pregnancy despite the harsh comments from classmates and teachers. He defended me, often getting into fights and even facing suspension. The birth was overwhelming, but Alan was by my side. 2 days after my 16th birthday, we welcomed our beautiful baby girl, Lauren. Holding her, we knew we couldn't give her up. Initially, my parents distanced themselves, so we moved in with Alan's parents and took on the challenges of young parenthood. True to their promise, his parents helped with Lauren's early care, allowing us to complete high school. After graduating, we both found jobs, had a simple wedding, and moved into a small home of our own. Our university plans had to be delayed when another unexpected arrival blessed us with a second daughter, Emma. In short, with years of hard work, parenting challenges, and family support, we managed to complete our university degrees part-time, taking turns working and studying while raising our 2 daughters. We were deeply in love. Alan adored his 2 daughters, and they shared a close bond. My relationship with them was more strained. We argued frequently, and at times I felt a sense of resentment toward them, perhaps subconsciously blaming them for the life I once envisioned at 15 but never had. After graduating from college, I landed a job as executive assistant to Dan Johnson, the business development manager at a medical equipment company. I was 29 and he was 38. Dan and I quickly formed a strong professional partnership. I was thriving in my role, sales were booming, management was pleased, and I had even received a substantial raise. For the first time, I felt like I was leading a stable, normal life. My job involved a good deal of travel, often overnight. Sometimes I traveled solo, but more frequently I was on the road with Dan. Exploring new places across the country, meeting clients, negotiating deals, and interacting with top-level executives was exhilarating. I was gaining incredible experience and enjoying every moment. I was away from home about 3 weeks out of every 4, with trips lasting anywhere from a single night to a full week or more, including occasional weekends. While the job and travel were fantastic, it also meant I was away from Alan and our daughters quite a bit, with Alan taking on most of the parenting responsibilities. Spending so much time with Dan, I got to know him well. Despite the age difference, he had been married about as long as I had and had 3 young children. To keep Alan from worrying about my frequent travels with Dan, I told a small lie saying I was usually traveling alone or with another woman. I also mentioned that while I worked well with Dan professionally, I found him difficult on a personal level. In reality, Dan was charismatic and captivating. I was both intrigued by him and deeply attracted. I loved our time together and looked forward to our evenings at cozy restaurants where we'd enjoy dinner, sip wine, and talk for hours. One night, about 6 months into my job, Dan and I celebrated landing a major sales order earlier that day. We ordered a special dinner and shared a bottle of fine French champagne. As we sat there, slightly tipsy and elated, he reached across the table, placing his hand on mine. Looking into my eyes, he said, "Amy, you know I'm falling hard for you." My heart raced and I was speechless. After a moment, he stood, extending his hand to me. I hesitated briefly, then took his hand and he led me up to his hotel room. Inside, we shared a passionate night together. In the morning, we woke and made tender love, a moment that felt like pure bliss. With our flight home not until late morning, we ordered breakfast, relaxed in bed, and shared another intimate moment before it was time to leave. On the flight home, I felt some guilt about my unfaithfulness. Rationalizing it, I thought about how I'd never had the chance to explore other relationships when I was younger, and I felt I deserved this experience. Besides, part of me blamed my husband for neglecting me, especially since our intimate life hadn't fully recovered from the difficult early years of our marriage. I suddenly realized I'd been so absorbed with Dan the night before that I forgot to call Emma and wish her a happy birthday. She had just turned 11 and was growing up so fast. Looking over at Dan beside me on the plane, he smiled and squeezed my hand. Despite knowing it was wrong, I knew I was deeply drawn to him. When I arrived home, guilt hit me hard. Alan was thrilled to see me after a week apart, but I pulled away from his hugs and kisses. Later that night, when he tried to be intimate, I put him off, saying I was too tired. In truth, I was exhausted and sore from the night with Dan. It was the first time I'd ever turned Alan down. 18 months have now passed, and my relationship with Dan is as intense as ever. Over time, I learned to manage my guilt by shutting off part of my emotions at home. I didn't realize then how much I was emotionally distancing myself from Alan and my daughters. My thoughts were always on Dan and when we could be together again. Lying became second nature, and eventually I felt less guilty. I had fallen deeply for Dan and occasionally considered leaving Alan to be with him. We even joked about it while lying together, though we knew it would be a major decision with painful consequences, especially for our children. As our company expanded, we traveled more often. Sometimes, when no work trips were scheduled, we'd arrange a fake overnight business trip to stay at a hotel in a nearby city. We also took occasional mini vacations for anniversaries and birthdays, disguised as conferences at far-off locations, often in lovely beach resorts where a real conference provided our alibi. At work, we were extremely cautious, keeping a professional front and never sneaking off to meet privately. We scheduled lunches at different times, arrived and left separately, and kept any one-on-one contact strictly hidden. We used private email accounts outside the work system to communicate and avoided meeting in our town. At office functions, we only interacted in large groups and never sat together or engaged in private conversations. I would call home at a pre-chosen time each day to avoid any surprises. I never shared hotel details, and Alan never asked. I frequently complained to him about my hard-headed boss, the constant travel, and demanding work. Alan often suggested finding a job with less travel and a kinder boss. but I'd tell him I was learning too much and earning too well to leave. At occasional work events where partners were invited, we were careful to keep our expressions and emotions well managed. I introduced my husband to my boss, and he introduced us to his wife. We kept our interactions short and polite, chatting briefly before moving on to talk with other colleagues, never glancing each other's way after that. We were meticulous about covering our tracks, and no one ever suspected anything. My husband, Alan, was glad to see me succeed at work, but he was also frustrated by my frequent absences, which left him handling most of the parenting on top of his own IT consulting job. I still loved Alan, but I couldn't ignore the sense that we were drifting apart. He always seemed occupied with the girls and his work, and I felt a pang of guilt realizing how rare our intimate moments had become and how little affection we now shared. I resolved to make an effort to reconnect with him.
We faced a challenging start, having our first child at 16, marrying at 18, and welcoming another child soon after. Through hard work and teamwork, we both managed to graduate from college, me with a degree in IT and Amy with one in commerce, all while raising our 2 daughters. Despite the struggles, we didn't mind because we loved each other deeply. When Amy landed her first professional job after graduation about 2 years ago, she was thrilled, and I was incredibly proud of her. Finally, we both had stable, well-paying careers, setting us up to enjoy a more balanced life together. Initially, I fully supported her career, but I began to feel frustrated by the long hours and travel her job demanded. She left home around 7 a.m. and usually didn't return until 6 or 7 p.m. most weeks. She was away 1 or 2 nights, sometimes longer, and often didn't get back until Saturday afternoon. When she was home during the week, she either worked after dinner or zoned out in front of the TV. Saturdays, she'd sleep in and then go shopping. Sundays, she'd spend the morning at the gym and then meet her friends for brunch. She was usually too exhausted for any evening plans with me. We didn't spend much quality time as a family. She always seemed too busy to take vacation time, so the girls and I often went on holidays without her. I noticed changes in her personality. The loving wife and mother I knew was becoming distant, often irritable, and more self-absorbed. Our intimate life had become lackluster, and I found myself feeling increasingly frustrated and annoyed. Whenever I tried to discuss it with her, she dismissed my concerns. She'd say it was all in my head, or that she was just tired from working hard for us, and that our intimate life was fine. I was worried about where things were heading. At the end of her first year on the job, I was invited to join her at the staff Christmas party at the CEO's home. There, I met her boss, Dan, and his wife for the first time. We had a polite, brief conversation before they moved on to mingle. Amy guided me to others and started chatting with her coworkers. Later, it suddenly struck me as a bit odd. Amy's boss seemed like a friendly, if somewhat reserved, person, not the tough character she had described. Dan's wife was also very pleasant. Given that Amy was his executive assistant, I'd expected a more engaging conversation than just a polite exchange. I could sense Amy was a bit tense. She tended to talk quickly when nervous, which was a tell. I found it strange for her to be nervous around her boss, considering how closely they worked together. Though I trusted her completely, I filed that thought away for later reflection. Over the next year, I was extremely busy as I decided to start my own IT consultancy. On top of that, I was raising our daughters almost entirely on my own. So, I set most of my concerns about Amy aside. Life with Amy felt much like the previous year. She was traveling even more and becoming increasingly distant from all 3 of us. I'd recently noticed her attitude toward me had grown dismissive and condescending. She showed me little affection, and our intimacy was nearly non-existent. On rare occasions, she'd engage, but it felt mechanical, lacking any real closeness. It was clear our relationship was fraying. At year's end, I attended her company's Christmas party again. Our brief interaction with her boss was almost identical to the previous year. For a moment, I wondered if she was hiding something. For the first time since we'd started dating at 15, I had doubts. Could there be someone else? The thought was difficult to process. We had fought so hard together to overcome challenges and reach where we were now. She wouldn't do that, would she? What should I do? I didn't go to extremes like hiring a private investigator or checking her computer, but I started watching her more closely. I didn't find anything out of place. Either it was all in my mind, or she was exceptionally skilled at covering her tracks. Still, things weren't right between us, but I was too busy to dwell on it. Meanwhile, our girls were growing up quickly. Lauren, now 15, was blossoming into a lovely young woman, and Emma, now 12, was on the brink of adolescence. We spent a lot of time together and had a close bond, though, unfortunately, their mother had little time for them. Both girls loved playing soccer, so every Saturday morning during the season, I'd watch them play. It was a highlight of my week. After the game, we'd grab lunch, usually at their favorite Japanese restaurant, and catch up on what they were doing. I noticed they rarely mentioned their mother. Depending on the weather, we'd walk along the beach, go to a movie, or they'd meet up with their friends. After the first game of the season, Emma came over with a new teammate. She was a striking young girl, tall, beautiful, with a wide smile, long dark hair, and deep brown eyes. Clearly athletic, she had already made an impression in her debut game, scoring 2 goals. "Hey Dad, this is Callie. Can I go to her place this afternoon?" "Hi Callie, nice to meet you." "Sure, Emma, as long as Callie's parents are okay with it." Callie turned and called, "Mom, can Emma come over this afternoon?" A woman, who was clearly Callie's mom, turned and walked toward us. I was stunned. She was like a grown-up version of her daughter, absolutely gorgeous. She introduced herself as Sophie, and she agreed to Emma coming over that afternoon. We chatted a bit, though I'm not sure what I even said. I realized I was babbling a bit. After they left, my daughters burst into laughter at my obvious embarrassment. That evening, Emma told me more about Sophie. Apparently, she was a single mom. Callie's dad had passed away in a car accident 3 years ago, and she was now raising Callie and her younger brother Tom, who was 11. The single mom details certainly caught my attention. The following Saturday, as Lauren and I watched Emma's soccer game, Sophie came over with her son and asked if they could watch with us. I had prepared myself this time and was determined to act more composed. We chatted during the game, and Sophie mentioned that she'd recently moved to town for a new job and didn't know many people yet. She expressed happiness that Callie and Emma had become friends, and complimented Emma on her good manners. After the game, Emma asked if Callie could come over to our place. I replied that it would be fine with me as long as it was okay with Sophie, who agreed that it was. I then invited Callie to join us for lunch, asking if she liked sushi. Callie responded enthusiastically that she loved it. I added that it was settled, and in the spur of the moment, suggested that they all join us for lunch. Sophie thanked me but declined, saying she didn't want to intrude on our family. Feeling a bit disappointed, I then heard Lauren encourage Sophie to join us, saying it would be lovely to have her company and that she would appreciate another woman to talk to, assuring Sophie that she wouldn't be intruding. After considering, Sophie looked at me and said that she'd love to join us if I was sure it was no trouble. I nodded and managed a response, likely somewhat incoherent once again. As we turned to head toward our cars, Lauren smirked at me, gave a big wink, and smiled. Lunch turned out to be a great success. The 4 girls especially ended up talking together for nearly 2 hours. I think Tom enjoyed having another male around, and we chatted a bit about computers and football. At one point, I overheard Sophie casually ask my daughters if their mom ever came to watch their soccer games. Lauren's response caught me off guard. "No, never. She doesn't show much interest in us. She's more focused on her job and herself. Dad's our mom, too. He's the one who takes care of us." Sophie glanced at me with a curious look. For the rest of the soccer season, it became a routine to have lunch together after each game. Emma and Callie grew closer, often alternating between our houses afterward and sometimes even after school. Occasionally, Tom would come over with his sister, though he preferred spending time with me. We'd tinker with computers, kick a soccer ball around, or go biking. I noticed that Lauren began visiting Sophie, and the two of them would often go shopping together, stopping for coffee and girl talk. I also observed that my daughters never mentioned Sophie to their mom, nor did I. Sophie and I were becoming good friends, too. Since I was practically a single parent like her, helping each other out made things easier. After the soccer season ended, Saturday afternoons increasingly became time when our kids would head out on their own to visit friends or go on outings. With my wife rarely around, I was mostly free, so Sophie and I often spent that time together, going for walks, having a casual lunch, or watching a movie. I found myself looking forward to these meetings and realized I was developing feelings for her, though we never crossed the line into anything beyond friendship. One day over coffee, I thanked Sophie for spending girl time with Lauren. "You know, she never stops talking about you when she gets home. Sophie this and Sophie that," I laughed. Sophie laughed too, saying, "Well, Tom's the same after visiting you. Alan this and Alan that. Honestly, he needs a male role model in his life, so I really appreciate you spending time with him." Then, she suddenly added, "Forgive me for being direct, Alan, but it's pretty clear things aren't all that great between you and your wife." We had always avoided discussing Amy, so her comment caught me off guard. I sat there in silence for about 30 seconds, realizing it was an issue I had avoided for a long time. "The truth is, Sophie, if it weren't for the girls, I probably would have left long ago. Things have been bad for several years. I've tried to talk to her repeatedly, but I just hit a brick wall. Our marriage was tough from the start. I'm sure Lauren told you how Amy and I ended up getting married. Yes, and she actually feels a bit responsible for your situation. It's ridiculous, of course, and I've been telling her it's absolutely not her fault. That broke down my own barriers, and I spent the next hour unloading all my troubles on Sophie. When I finished, she came over and held me tightly in her arms. It was the first real hug from a woman I'd had in ages. I'm here for you whenever you need me, Alan. You know that. I hugged her tighter, not wanting to let go. Not long after, as another year was wrapping up, Amy's annual staff Christmas party arrived once more. My reintroduction to her boss went much like the past 2 years, but this time I was on high alert. Though Amy and her boss seemed more relaxed around each other, something felt off. I was definitely growing suspicious. Later in the evening, Amy excused herself to use the restroom. A minute later, I noticed her boss casually making his way upstairs as well. I decided to follow and looked around for her. She wasn't in the restroom, so I searched through the large house. Just as I was about to pass a slightly ajar bedroom door, I heard her voice inside say, "Merry Christmas, my darling." A man's voice replied, "Merry Christmas, my love." Peeking through the crack, I saw Amy and her boss locked in a long, passionate kiss, their hands all over each other. In shock, I quickly stepped back. I returned downstairs reeling and contemplated my next move. Beyond anger, I felt empty. I'm not one to confront immediately, so I calmed myself down, deciding instead to investigate and plan. A bit later, Amy returned, looking a little flushed, and spent the rest of the night pretending to be my devoted wife. I played along as if nothing had happened. By New Year's, while Amy was asleep, I'd managed to access her phone and laptop. Amy should have known better. Leaving incriminating evidence on her personal computer, even if well hidden, isn't wise when her husband's profession involves computer security. My worst fears were confirmed. In her work, personal, and secret email accounts, I found a damning trail of evidence. Amy had been in a long-term, intense affair with her boss that had begun over 2 years ago. There were graphic photos and videos of them together, underscoring the depth of her betrayal. Their emails even hinted at discussions about leaving their respective partners to be together. While Amy seemed interested, her lover appeared more hesitant. I realized I'd been a naive, oblivious husband. I installed hidden surveillance software on both her phone and laptop, allowing me to monitor her every electronic and physical move remotely, if needed. My marriage was clearly over, and my priority now was keeping custody of my daughters and securing my business and finances. After the new year, I consulted a divorce lawyer who explained that divorces are no fault, meaning I couldn't file based on adultery. However, regarding custody, she explained that once children turn 14, they can choose which parent they want to live with. She also helped develop a strategy to protect my company in the divorce settlement. With Emma turning 14 in 6 months, I decided I could bear living with Amy until then, giving me time to prepare. I would have to keep everything secret from her to make it work. I told Sophie what I'd uncovered, and she broke down in tears. I was surprised. I'd thought I'd be the one needing comfort. I held her, and she tearfully revealed that her late husband had died in a car accident with his secretary, with whom she later found out he'd been having an affair, making the loss even more painful. Once she calmed down, we discussed my plan to leave Amy, and Sophie just smiled knowingly. To begin, I persuaded Amy that since we were both earning well, we should sell our small house and rent a larger one while searching for our dream home, using the equity as a down payment. She agreed easily, and our house sold quickly. We rented a nearby place, with the lease in my name only for a 6-month term. Sharing a bed with Amy was unbearable, and when we moved, I used a bad cold as an excuse to sleep in the spare room to avoid spreading it. I simply never moved back, and she didn't mention it. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe she preferred it that way. Next, I confided in my dad and had him set up a new IT company with him as the official owner and myself as the sole employee. I then closed my company and began operating through his. Everything was going according to plan until one day, Lauren approached me looking nervous and frightened. My immediate thought, with a pang of déjà vu, was that she might be pregnant, just like her mom had been. "Dad, this is really hard to tell you, but Mom is having an affair with her boss." I was shocked that she knew, and found myself at a loss for words. "Really? Why do you think that?" "Well, shortly after we moved in here, Emma and I went back to the old house to pick up something she'd forgotten. Mom and her boss were there." "That's unusual, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything." "They were being intimate on the floor in the living room." Once I got over the initial shock, I replied, "I know about the affair, Lauren. I've known for a while. Then why don't you do something about it?" "Did Emma see them too?" "Yes." I called Emma, who had been listening nearby, and she came into the room, looking embarrassed. I hugged them both, understanding how difficult it must have been for them to witness, especially for Emma. "Can you both keep a very big secret?" They nodded. "I'm planning to leave your mother soon. I'm just waiting until Emma turns 14, so you can both legally decide where you want to live." "With you!" they both shouted together. "It won't be easy keeping this secret, but we can't let your mother suspect anything until then." They shared a conspiratorial smile. Afterward, I asked Sophie to have a heart-to-heart with Lauren. Now that Lauren had her first boyfriend, I didn't want her to follow in her mother's footsteps. Fortunately, Amy wasn't around often, so we could handle her occasional presence and keep our plans secret. We enjoyed ourselves even more when she was away, knowing that the end was near. We were spending more and more time with Sophie and her kids, often sharing meals at each other's homes or going out together. One Friday afternoon, while my wife was supposedly at a conference for the weekend, but was actually with her boss at a hotel, Lauren announced, "Dad, I'm babysitting for Sophie tonight." "Oh, really? What's she doing?" "She's going on a dinner date with a guy at Brasserie Paris, that fancy French place downtown." I immediately felt a wave of jealousy and tried unsuccessfully to hide it. Lauren looked at me with a mix of pity and amusement. "She's going out with you, Dad. It's time you both had a real date. I made the reservation already, so go on. Just call her and ask her properly," she said, handing me my phone. "What if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? We're just friends after all. I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable." "How you managed to get through college is beyond me. Just call her." So I did, and Sophie sounded absolutely thrilled and accepted right away. Somehow I got the feeling this wasn't a surprise to her. That evening, it took me 3 attempts before my daughters were satisfied that I was dressed well enough for dinner. As I was about to leave, Callie and Tom arrived. Seeing my questioning look, Lauren said, "Oh, I forgot to mention, they're staying over tonight, so don't worry about coming home late, or even at all if you'd prefer." She smiled and handed me an already packed overnight bag. Clearly, our children had worked together on this plan. When I arrived, Sophie greeted me at the door. Oh my God. She was wearing a fitted black cocktail dress with a plunging neckline and high heels. The dress hugged every curve of her athletic figure. Her 34C chest, free of any bra, created an alluring effect, with 2 enticing points visible. Her long black hair was swept to one side in a loose braid. "Well, say something, Alan. I'm speechless." "You like?" she asked, doing a little twirl. "Oh, much more than like, Sophie." We had a fantastic dinner, enjoying each other's company the entire time. When we got to her front door at the end of the evening, I said, "I know our kids arranged for me to stay the night, but you don't have to feel..." She placed a finger over my lips and whispered, "I'm counting on you staying," then led me inside and up to her bedroom. I had no intention of arguing with that. We started out a bit shy and tentative. It was the first time for both of us with someone new. If I'd thought she looked stunning before, seeing her without clothes was absolutely breathtaking. It didn't take long for us to feel at ease and fully embrace the moment. I let go of all my pent-up frustration, both mental and physical, and felt as if I'd reached pure bliss. By the end, I was completely spent. The next morning, we made sweet love again, and afterward, we stayed in bed, savoring the afterglow and the warmth of our bodies intertwined. It had been a long time for both of us, and everything felt so right. Soon we heard footsteps on the stairs, voices, and a knock at the door, which then opened. Lauren poked her head in. "Good morning, you two. It's almost 10, and we got tired of waiting, so we came over. Breakfast will be ready downstairs in 20 minutes. Oh, and I was going to ask if you had a good evening, but judging by your faces, there's no need." She grinned. We heard laughter as they all walked away. "How did we end up with such a great bunch of kids, Sophie?" The breakfast they prepared was delicious, and it was wonderful to share it together, almost like a family. Later at home, I attempted to explain to my daughters what had happened with Sophie, reminding them that technically I was still married. They responded by rolling their eyes and laughing at my awkwardness, telling me it was time for me to be happy again, and insisting that, in reality, I wasn't truly married to their mom anymore, since she had emotionally left a long time ago. When I asked them what they were all plotting with this grand conspiracy, they revealed that they'd all agreed Emma and I needed a mother, while Callie and Tom needed a father, concluding that Sophie and I belonged together, making it a win for everyone involved. Still hesitant, I pointed out that even if I thought it was a good idea, Sophie might not feel the same way. They laughed, urging me to realize how obvious her feelings were, and that I should be able to tell what she wanted. When I asked if I had any say in this, they replied, clearly amused, that I had absolutely no choice in the matter. They found my discomfort thoroughly entertaining, and it was clear I was now being firmly guided by my daughters. A few days later, over dinner with everyone present, I mentioned my plans to start house hunting the following weekend. Sophie, curious, asked what kind of place I was looking for. I explained that I wanted something near the beach, 2 stories with a large family room, a kids' escape room, a big backyard, and a pool. I added that it needed at least 6 bedrooms in case my family grew in the future, and, looking directly at her, mentioned that I also wanted to be sure that a woman I might be falling head over heels for would like it too. Sophie held my gaze for a long moment, then walked over and kissed me passionately in front of the kids. When we finally broke apart, the kids watched in silence for a moment before bursting into cheers and dancing around us. I took that as a yes. After a few weeks of searching, we found the perfect home. We decided to buy it together, using her husband's life insurance money and the proceeds from my house sale as a deposit. The stage was set for the showdown with Amy. As Emma's 14th birthday, and therefore D-Day, approached, Amy announced she'd be attending a week-long sales conference on the West Coast. Checking her emails later, I discovered that she was actually headed on vacation with her boss to celebrate their 3rd anniversary on the island of Bali in Indonesia. To keep this under wraps, they each told colleagues they were going on family vacations to make up for the time they'd been dedicating to work. Amy would leave a day before her boss and travel solo, with him following the next day. She planned to return a day earlier than he would to maintain the story's credibility. They were getting sloppy. This plan was far from foolproof and could easily fall apart if anyone took the time to look into it. Once Amy flew out for her conference, we began packing and moved into our new house right away, where Sophie and her kids had settled a month earlier. If there's a Balinese god of revenge, it must have been smiling on me. The very evening Amy arrived, Bali's active volcano, Mount Agung, erupted, filling the air with clouds of volcanic ash. All flights in and out of Bali were immediately canceled. Her lover was still home while Amy was stuck in Bali alone for their anniversary. I laughed so hard I nearly lost my breath. It was almost too perfect to believe. The volcanic activity continued, and flights remained grounded, keeping the pair apart. Behind the scenes, I checked Amy's emails and messages daily for amusement. The two of them were not pleased with the situation, and Amy was growing increasingly frustrated with Dan, as if it were his fault. Occasionally, Amy would call home, telling us how busy she was with the conference, and I'd ask her about the hotel and the city she claimed to be in. Later, when I accessed her laptop remotely, I saw she'd been frantically searching online for information to give me believable answers. Meanwhile, all 6 of us were settling into our new home comfortably. I had my lawyer file a legal separation document with the family court. I also obtained interim custody of my daughters by filing their signed requests to live with me. As Amy's return date drew closer, flights were still canceled, leaving me wondering how she would manage the situation. One evening, she called to say that she'd made many promising sales connections at the conference, and her boss had asked her to stay longer to follow up on them immediately before coming home. I could sense her nervousness. Fortunately for her, it wasn't a video call, as I couldn't have kept a straight face. I simply reassured her that we were fine and that I understood. After another week passed with her still stranded in Bali, I watched as frantic emails and messages flew between Amy and her boss. He'd informed everyone at work that she'd had to extend her leave due to a family emergency. Her boss even called me, apologizing profusely for keeping Amy away for so long, but insisted it was a critical opportunity for the company. I'd anticipated his call and was ready to respond like the understanding husband of a busy professional wife. I assured him that everything was fine and that I understood, then casually asked where Amy would be traveling next. He scrambled to name a few places. I later read the email where he relayed that information to Amy, so she'd know where she was supposed to be. My strategy was to make her uneasy, planting the seeds of doubt that she'd been found out. Each time she called, I reassured her, but I also asked specific questions about the sites in the towns she was supposedly visiting. I could tell what she'd researched in advance, so I threw in a few unexpected questions just to watch her scramble, all while playing the part of a clueless husband. During one call, I remarked, "Hey, Amy, have you been hearing about those poor people stuck in Bali who can't get home because of the volcano?" After a brief silence, she replied, "Oh yes, but I haven't paid much attention to the news. One of my colleagues has been stuck there for 2 weeks. You remember Paul Howard and his wife? We met them about 6 months ago." "Oh, yes. We're working on a project and he's been doing his part remotely from his hotel in Nusa Dua. At least the Grand Hyatt isn't a bad place to be stuck." I heard a sharp intake of breath from Amy. She was, of course, staying at the Grand Hyatt, although Paul wasn't even in Bali, but she didn't know that. Immediately after the call, she moved to a cheap hotel on the other side of the island, likely hoping she could still cover her tracks. My 5 girls, and yes, Sophie's children were mine now, found the whole situation hilarious. Finally, nearly 3 weeks later, the volcanic eruption stopped and flights resumed from Bali. Amy called to let me know her work was wrapping up and that she'd be home Friday afternoon. I waited for her return at our rented, now otherwise empty house. I'd planned this meeting very carefully. When she arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She entered looking tired and visibly nervous, with a deep suntan that was a little out of place for someone supposedly on a business trip. I skipped the usual, obligatory kiss on the cheek. Wow, you've got quite a tan from your business trip. Did you manage to get any work done? She stammered something, her face turning red. Sit down and have a glass of wine with me. I poured wine into my glass and took a sip. Alan, I'm exhausted. I just want to go upstairs, take a shower, and rest before dinner. I'm sorry, but there's something we need to discuss right now, so please sit down. I added that the girls were staying overnight with a friend so we wouldn't be disturbed. Amy's face showed real fear, clearly thinking her time was up, but she didn't yet know how. Reluctantly, she sat down, and I poured her a glass. I had rehearsed this speech many times, making sure to wear a remorseful expression. You know things between us haven't been good for a while, Amy. Do you know why that might be? She looked terrified and managed only a faint, no. I'm sorry, Amy, there's no easy way to say this. The truth is, I've met someone else. I love her and want to be with her, so I've decided to leave you. In an instant, shock replaced her fearful look, and fury took over as she sat there, speechless. I continued, keeping my apologetic tone. I never intended for it to happen. You were away so much. I guess I just felt lonely. How dare you do this to me, Alan, after all I've done for you? She spat out, her voice dripping with anger, going on with accusations. I sat quietly, maintaining a sorrowful look as she ranted for a solid 5 minutes. I can see you're very upset, and I understand. There's no point in discussing this further now. I'll come back tomorrow afternoon around 4 so we can talk more. There's a lot we need to work out. I left, ignoring her angry texts and voicemails that followed. When I arrived home, everyone was eager to know how it had gone. Even better than expected, I replied. We had pizza for dinner and watched a movie together. The girls turned off their phones to avoid their mother, though I reminded them they couldn't cut contact with her altogether. Why hadn't I confronted her about the affair? Because leaving her this way would be far more painful. That night, Sophie and I shared tender love, and every worry and bit of tension seemed to melt away. Amy who? The next afternoon, I arrived at the old house with a folder of paperwork. I was greeted by a still very angry Amy, accompanied by her best friend Claire, a lawyer I had never liked. I had seen old emails where Claire had encouraged Amy to continue the affair when Amy was feeling guilty and considering ending it. I sat down at the table across from them, ready to proceed. Claire took the lead, clearly opting for an aggressive approach. She launched into a lengthy tirade, calling me a terrible husband and praising Amy as a wonderful wife and mother. She accused me of taking advantage of Amy while she was away working hard for the family, insisting I should be begging for Amy's forgiveness. Claire warned that if I didn't reconcile, Amy would clean me out in the divorce, take custody of the girls, and I'd never see them again. Hypocritical as it was, they seemed to assume that if I'd known about Amy's affair with her boss, I would have already confronted it last night. I kept a sorrowful, apologetic, and slightly puzzled expression. Amy, I know this must be painful for you, but I admit I'm a little surprised at how angry you are. For quite a while, I haven't felt that you loved me anymore. You've been distant, both physically and emotionally, from our marriage for the last 3 years. That's complete nonsense, Alan. Of course, I've been here. Yes, I work a lot, which takes me away sometimes, but I do it for us. Well then, Amy, tell me, when was the last time we made love? Amy stayed silent. I can tell you it was 3 years ago. That's not true at all. We do have sex. Yes, very occasionally, but I was talking about making love. I even remember the exact time. 3 years ago, you were on a business trip and forgot to call Emma on her 11th birthday. She tried to reach you repeatedly that evening, but couldn't get hold of you. She was heartbroken. I remember it well because Emma's birthday was just 2 weeks ago, and while you were away again, you forgot to call her. It felt like the anniversary of something painful. She gave me a guilty look. After you returned from that trip 3 years ago, things between us were never the same. I've often wondered why. I could see from their expressions that I'd struck a chord. They both looked uncomfortable and exchanged uneasy glances. After all, Amy, we've been sleeping in separate bedrooms for about 6 months now. That hasn't seemed to bother you. I can't even remember the last time we went out together or took a vacation. It almost feels like you're taking your vacations at work. They both flinched. When you're home, you're not really here. Not with me and not with the girls either. I smiled inwardly as I saw them squirm. In any case, Amy, I'm sorry, but I'm moving forward. I hope we can make this separation as smooth as possible for the girls' sake. There's no chance for reconciliation. Who is she? Do I know her? You've met her daughter, Callie, Emma's best friend. Her mom, Sophie, and I met last year at Saturday soccer and became friends. Over time, our friendship grew into love. We've been in a relationship and recently decided to move in together. Before they could respond, I placed a large, organized folder on the table. I've prepared some documents for you. Tab A is a legal separation agreement I filed in court 2 weeks ago. Tab B is a divorce application for you to sign. The sooner you sign, the sooner we can move forward. Tab C outlines a proposed financial settlement. Tab D includes a new rental agreement for this house. The lease expires in 3 weeks, so if you wish to stay, you'll need to renew it in your name. Tab E includes all the utility contracts, with termination notices set for 3 weeks. You'll need to transfer these to your name if you want to stay. In Tab F, you'll find bank statements. I've taken 60% of the funds in our joint accounts. Credit cards in your name are now solely your responsibility. Lastly, Tab G is an interim custody and child support order. The girls have opted to live with me, so I have custody. Child support will be automatically deducted from your paycheck. Visitation access is flexible, so we can work out an arrangement. They were visibly stunned by how thoroughly prepared I was. Claire, unable to contain herself, sneered, "You've been plotting this for ages, haven't you? We're not going to let you get away with it. We'll take your company, the girls, and every cent you have." "Yes, I have been preparing since Christmas," I replied calmly. "At your staff Christmas party, Amy, I realized things were truly over, and it was time to act." I could see Amy struggling to remember what had happened that night. "So, selling the house to buy another was a sham then?" Claire said accusingly. I simply smiled. "As for taking everything, Claire, there's nothing to take. I closed my company months ago. I'm now employed by someone else. I bought a new house with Sophie after filing for separation, so it's not a marital asset. Since I have legal custody of the girls, I used 60% of the house sale funds to purchase our new home. So, honestly, I don't see what you can do here, Claire. And as for custody, state law allows children over 14 to choose where they want to live, and they chose me. You're really a lowlife, Alan. I bet you poisoned the girls against Amy. I wouldn't do that. I'm not that kind of person. Even if I wanted to influence them, I didn't need to. Amy has done that herself by neglecting them these past 3 years. Amy, if you want to rebuild a strong relationship with them, you'll need to work at it. Their well-being depends on a healthy bond with their mother." Claire argued that Amy hadn't neglected the girls and insisted she was a good mother. I countered that the girls didn't see it that way, pointing out that she had been practically absent from their lives for years. I then urged Amy to consider who actually took care of their needs, who fed them, took them to sports, packed their school lunches, helped with homework, bought their clothes, remembered their birthdays and got them presents, went to movies with them, listened to their problems, helped them through their first periods, and gave them love and affection. I left the question open, and Amy fell silent, visibly struggling to process it all. I then informed her that the girls had asked if she'd meet them for brunch the next morning at 10 a.m. at the beachside cafe. I admitted it was my suggestion, as they weren't especially eager to see her. I asked if I should let them know she agreed. Amy simply nodded. I left them and returned home to my family. The girls reported back the next day that Amy spent the entire time bad-mouthing me and demanding they come live with her. In the end, they excused themselves to go to the restroom and quietly slipped out instead. I couldn't understand why she wanted to reconcile. She hadn't cared about me in years. Perhaps I'd just been a convenient babysitter and housekeeper.
It was a complete shock when Alan told me he was leaving me for someone else. How could he? I thought he loved me. Even though I tried a few times to talk about reconciliation, he wasn't interested. And our only interaction was when picking up or dropping off our daughters for visits. The girls were openly hostile, and time spent with them was uncomfortable. When I dropped them off, they'd run happily to their new stepmother and hug her, clearly intending to frustrate me. Eventually, I told them not to visit until they truly wanted to. I had always envisioned my life continuing as it was, with my lover for my enjoyment while Alan took care of me at home. The shock of Alan actually leaving was devastating. Over the following months, I realized that while his decision was surprising, it shouldn't have been. Alan was right. In many ways, I'd been absent as a wife. I'd poured nearly all my affection, emotional closeness, and intimacy into Dan over the last 3 years, leaving very little for Alan. The real surprise was that he'd stayed as long as he had. Unable to afford the rent on the house along with child support, I had to move into a small, old apartment. I spent my nights alone, watching TV and eating takeout. Dan's attitude changed too after Alan left me. Suddenly, he was often too busy with his family to spend much time with me, even though I was now single and available. More and more, he sent me on business trips alone, saying I could handle clients by myself. When we were together, the emotional connection felt gone, and we just ended up having sex. But it wasn't fulfilling anymore. About 6 months after my marriage ended, Dan announced he was taking a job in another city with a new company. Tearfully, I told him never to contact me again. I quickly became a divorced woman. I couldn't help but think of that Joni Mitchell line, "Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone?" Foolishly, I'd thought I could have it all. It didn't help that Alan was now with a beautiful woman who was so kind that I couldn't even hate her. He looked so happy with his new partner, the same way he'd looked with me when we were young parents, struggling together but deeply in love. I remembered how we used to face every hardship together and come out strong. How had I let that fall apart? My daughters seemed much happier too, treating Sophie as a mother figure rather than me. I had become just an unwelcome reminder of their past, someone they felt obligated to see occasionally. That hurt deeply. I think I hit rock bottom when I started complaining to my daughters about my situation. Lauren looked at me with a cold stare, remarking that I had essentially tossed Dad aside. I admitted to her that I hadn't been a perfect wife and may have neglected them, but pointed out that he was the one who had left me for another woman. Lauren, however, corrected me, explaining that he had left because I'd been having an affair with my boss for 3 years. The horror on my face said it all. I felt completely ashamed. Alan had known the whole time but had chosen to stay silent. My life was in shambles. I realized I had truly thrown away a wonderful husband and nearly lost my daughters. True to his word, Alan had encouraged the girls to keep in contact with me, reminding me that I had a lot of work ahead to repair our relationship. Gradually, the girls began visiting of their own accord and even stayed the night sometimes. One evening, as I dropped the girls off at their new home, I asked Alan if we could have a brief talk, and he walked with me to the car. I turned to him and told him I'd learned from Lauren that he had known about Dan and me. Apologizing, I admitted he had been a good husband who didn't deserve what I'd done. I confessed that I had acted selfishly and got what I deserved. Alan simply nodded. I then asked why he hadn't told me he knew, wondering if he could have stopped me before it was too late to save our marriage. He explained that by the time he had found out, it was already too late. Curious, I asked him when he'd first discovered it. Alan revealed that he'd caught me sneaking away with Dan at the office Christmas party the previous year, and afterward had uncovered everything. I blushed deeply, feeling a wave of shame. Alan admitted that he'd been quite amused when I ended up stranded in Bali alone. Feeling miserable, I asked if he hated me and why he hadn't confronted me. He explained that he'd been angry but wanted me to feel his pain and experience some consequences. He told me he'd discovered that I hadn't been Dan's first assistant, noting that Dan had a pattern of capture and dump. Alan had decided the best punishment was to stay quiet and let events unfold. Knowing Dan's history, Alan figured that if the affair stayed hidden, Dan would string me along for a while before losing interest and eventually leaving me. Alan had worried that if he confronted me and the affair went public, Dan's wife might divorce him, leaving Dan free to be with me and avoid any consequences. He admitted, too, that he thought it would hurt me more if I thought he'd simply left for another woman. I have to admit, Alan, your plan worked flawlessly. You definitely got your revenge. My life has completely fallen apart. He replied, I suppose, looking back, I'm a little sorry you were hurt so badly. Just a bit, to be honest. You don't need to apologize. It was my fault. If you had done what I did, I'd have walked out on you too. Looking back, I was swept up by the excitement and got dependent to it. I tried to stop early on, but by then I was too far gone. I became so obsessed with him and so focused on my own wants that I ignored you and the girls for a while. My anger's faded now, Amy, and I do forgive you. I'm more philosophical about it, I guess. After all, I wouldn't be with Sophie now if you hadn't cheated. I know, I said, and that's what hurts the most. Our marriage was hard from the beginning, Amy, so I don't think you're a terrible person. You made a serious mistake, yes, but he was very good at manipulation. You never got the chance to grow up normally, enjoy being a teen, and figure out who you truly wanted to spend your life with. You were ripe for the picking, and he took full advantage. You're probably right, Alan, but why did you have to tell the girls about him? That was just too cruel. No wonder they resented me. I didn't tell them, Amy. They told me. What? How? They went back to our old house unexpectedly and found you two in action in the living room. It was right after we moved our things out. At first I couldn't remember, but then it hit me with horror. What did they see? Pretty much everything, even Emma. Lauren gave me quite a vivid description of it. My body seemed to collapse under the weight of it, and I began to sob uncontrollably, oblivious to my surroundings. I don't know how long I cried, but I became aware of Alan's arms around me, holding me tightly as I buried my head in his chest. That familiar comfort only made me cry harder. I vaguely sensed being lifted and carried inside, then laid gently on the couch. I felt so awful. Everyone, including Alan's new partner Sophie, was being incredibly kind. She insisted I stay and calm down, then, once I'd recovered, insisted I join them for dinner. Sitting around the table with his new family, I saw how happy Alan looked. I realized just how badly I'd messed up. Later, as I walked out to my car, Alan put his hands on my shoulders. Amy, I don't want you to keep punishing yourself like this. We both had a rough start in life, becoming parents and committing so young. When you think about it, it's actually amazing our marriage lasted 14 years. That's something we can both be proud of. And look at the positives. Our 2 mistakes gave us 2 amazing daughters who have grown into wonderful young women. That's a fantastic legacy from our marriage that no one can ever take away. You're right about that, Alan. Speaking of mistakes, I should tell you I've made another one. Sophie is pregnant, so we're moving up the wedding. You certainly are mistake-prone. You're a good man and a great husband, Alan, better than I deserved. I do wish you all the best. I gave him a hug and kissed him on the cheek before leaving. My place in his life had truly been filled. All I could hope for now was to find someone as good as him, but that felt like a long shot.
Why had I forgiven Amy so easily? For a few reasons. Hatred can consume you, leaving bitterness behind. She was also constantly reminded of her choices just by seeing me happy with Sophie. And though things had fallen apart, there was still a bond between us from the love we once shared. While I'd wanted to see Amy face consequences, my true revenge was aimed at her boss, Dan, the one who'd lured her away from me in the first place. I had managed to hack into Dan's computer by sending an email disguised to look like it came from Amy, embedded with a Trojan that gave me full access. I discovered he had been quietly and cleverly embezzling money from his old employer and was pulling the same scheme at his current job. I gathered all the evidence and sent it anonymously to both companies and to the police. With the undeniable evidence stacked against him, Dan pleaded guilty at his trial and received a 7-year prison sentence. His wife stood by him through the court process and visited him in prison with their children. Later, I met with her and showed her additional evidence of his numerous affairs. Furious, she decided on the spot to leave him. To complete my revenge, I visited Dan in prison. At first, he didn't recognize me. "Hi, Dan, we've actually met before. I'm Amy's ex-husband." "What the hell do you want, jerk?" "I'm here with some messages. First, from my former wife, Amy. She sends her regards and hopes you're enjoying the new home I personally helped arrange for you." "What?" "You know, you really should have hired someone to encrypt your computer. After hacking it, it took me only 15 minutes to find everything. I just couldn't resist passing it all along to the police." Once his anger simmered down, I continued. "By the way, I also paid a visit to your wife and shared the photos and videos I found of you and your girlfriends. She was extremely angry. She insisted we have a little revenge fling in your bed, and I couldn't say no. I have to wonder why she wasn't enough for you. She was quite wild." "That's a lie. She wanted me to share these with you." I laid out photos of us together in various intimate positions, though they had been cleverly faked with Photoshop, something he wouldn't know. She also had a message. "She'll never visit you here again, and you won't be seeing your children anymore." I referred her to my lawyer who's handling her divorce. His expression was priceless. Yes, revenge is indeed a dish best served cold.